On April 15, 2019, an unexpected fire almost destroyed one of the most famous buildings in the world, the Notre-Dame Cathedral in Paris.
Most famous buildings in the world. Fire that nearly destroyed it.
The blaze that has been ravaging the cathedral.
It spread quickly, burning through the tall spire and most of the roof. The fire began in the evening and was raging until the next morning. The flames destroyed much of the roof, but firefighters managed to save the main part of the cathedral and priceless pieces of art that were inside. But it was a narrow escape. Who could have known that it was a blessing in disguise, sort of? After the fire, a team of about 50 archaeologists started working at the ruins. They found some artifacts dating back over 2,000 years. One of the most interesting finds was 2 lead coffins, or sarcophagi. Scientists who studied it had to wear special clothes to protect them from lead when they were opening the finds. They found the bones of 2 wealthy men inside, but despite their riches, it looked like they had had tough lives. One of the men was easy to identify because there was an epitaph on the coffin. Only wealthy people could afford lead coffins in the 18th century because they helped to keep the body in good condition. But the coffin was broken, and there were only some bones, some hair, and bits of clothing left inside. The scientists could tell from the bones that the man didn't move around much and had a health condition called gout. It affects joints, especially the knees, so he was sure to have a hard time walking. Money couldn't help him get rid of that, but he used it wisely though. Antoine helped to pay for the cathedral's choir and ordered some paintings that are now in the Louvre Museum. The person in the second sarcophagus remained a mystery for a long time, but scientists say they might know who he was. When they first looked at the bones, they found that they belonged to a man who was between 25 and 40 years old. They also saw that he probably rode horses from an early age. This man's bones showed signs that he had long-lasting health problems, and most of his teeth were missing before he died. His skull was shaped differently, possibly because he wore a special headband as a kid. The researchers think that this man might be the French poet Joachim du Bellay, who lived between 1522 and 1560. He was a skilled horse rider and had lung problems. It's strange that, although he wasn't a church leader, he was buried in a cathedral and not in a side chapel near his uncle like his family wanted. Scientists think that either he was buried in a temporary spot that later became permanent, or his coffin was moved after all his works had been published. Only a DNA test could establish if it was really Joachim du Bellay, so the mystery lives on for now. The fire did help to solve another Notre Dame mystery: how the thin walls support the vaulted ceiling at such a great height. When it was finished, the cathedral was the tallest building since the Great Pyramid, with a height of the vaults of 105 feet. That's about the height of a 10-story building. The fire of 2019 revealed a secret hiding inside the walls: thousands of iron staples. Each of them is about 8 to 20 inches long, like the length of a ruler or a little longer, and they weigh 3 to 9 pounds. Before using iron, builders would put wooden rods between the walls to help keep everything steady, but wood is not as strong as iron and can break more easily. Iron is also easier to hide inside the walls, so it made the cathedral look like it was held up by magic. This idea of an iron skeleton was so good that other churches started using it too. By the way, we could have lost Notre Dame completely in the 19th century. The Parisians were tired of the Gothic style and signed a petition for Notre Dame's demolition. And that's when famous writer Victor Hugo, who loved architecture, saved the cathedral with The Hunchback of Notre Dame. The novel became a hit, and people learned to appreciate the beautiful medieval construction all over again, and it was refurbished. A team of craftspeople fixed the existing features and added new elements, including a spire weighing 750 tons, copper statues, and the 56 Chimera. The gargoyles that became the symbols of Notre Dame weren't there from the start either. It took almost 200 years to finish the cathedral, and during that time Gothic style came into fashion. So, by the time it was finished, Notre-Dame had dozens of those mythical creatures made of limestone. They had a very practical function: to channel water away from the walls and foundations and save the building from erosion. In 1926, a book called The Mystery of the Cathedrals was published in Paris. It said that the secrets of alchemy were hidden right on the walls of Notre Dame. Yes, that ancient form of magic that was mentioned in Harry Potter. Alchemy isn't a real science, but art experts now mostly agree that Notre Dame is an alchemical text in stone. On the roof of one of Notre Dame's towers, called the North Tower, there is a picture carved in stone, not of any saint, but of an alchemist. He's wearing a special Phrygian hat. It shows that the person is part of Hermeticism, a group that studied secret knowledge. At the main entrance of the cathedral, there's a big door called the Portal of the Last Judgment. The author of the book said that this door has clues about the Philosopher's Stone, which alchemists believe could turn regular metals into gold and give people eternal life. On the central part of this door, there is a carving of a woman holding a ladder with 9 steps. This is called the Ladder of the Philosopher. It's meant to show the 9 steps or stages that an alchemist must go through to complete their work. All around the cathedral, there are more stone bas-reliefs. One of them shows a man holding a shield with a symbol called a caduceus. It's a symbol of the deity Hermes, and it also represents Mercury, a crucial element in alchemy. In the story of Hermes, this staff had the power to bring people back to life. There are also 12 scriptures of the apostles decorating the arches on the sides of the door. One of these apostles is pointing up at an angel, and the angel is pointing toward the left bank of the Seine River. Some people think that this might be a clue about where the Philosopher's Stone is hidden. An eagle carved on the same portal is also pointing in the same direction as the angel. The eagle also represents the power to change regular metal into gold. The main doors of Notre Dame are covered in iron designs that look complicated to make even now. So they seemed almost impossible in the Middle Ages, when there were no fancy machines we have now. According to a legend, the ironwork was made by a young metalworker named Biscornet. It took him months of demanding work, but finally, the iron designs were finished and put onto the doors of the cathedral. When the people saw it, they could hardly believe that a human could create something so beautiful. They said he must have made a deal with evil forces, and the swirling designs looked like the number 666. The fact that his name means two-horned only made things worse. Not long after the doors were installed, Biscornet passed away from all the stress and hard work. But for many people in Paris, it was only proof of the rumors. They believed that something really dark and otherworldly had come to take the man's soul as part of the deal he made to create the doors. Ooh.
Deep inside the heart of the Amazon rainforest lies a cave so massive, it defies logic. Stretching for 2,000 feet, this tunnel is so big a human could easily walk around inside of it. Its walls are etched with deep, mysterious claw marks. But this is just one of many. If you travel to the south of Brazil, you'll stumble upon over 1,500 similar caves, ranging from modest tiny burrows to massive passageways. These are not your average spooky, bat-filled caverns. They're what researchers call paleo burrows, also known as ancient underground structures dug by creatures so colossal they make modern elephants look small. Whatever creature dug those tunnels displaced 800 elephants worth of dirt. I know, it still looks like a normal cave, but experts noticed this one was special because the walls were too neat and rounded, and the floor was too smooth. Besides, no water or erosion leaves such signs of serious digging power. These Brazilian caves are the largest geological records of animal activity on the planet. It's like stumbling into a prehistoric house made by creatures the size of cars. To unlock this mystery, researchers analyzed the scratch marks on the walls and realized they had probably been made by giant ground sloths, a species called valgipes. which could weigh nearly 9,000 pounds and eat your average annual menu in about 3 days. Despite being huge, these animals were not earthbenders. They had to work in groups if they wanted to dig such long tunnels. This is why scientists believe many sloths shared the same tunnel and dug it together. Even some giant armadillos may have helped with the digging. After all, they were ridiculously skilled excavators and lived there too. Okay, but why would a giant sloth or armadillo need a 2,000-foot-long underground lair? Great question. And the truth is, scientists aren't totally sure. It doesn't make sense for them to dig tunnels this massive just to escape predators, especially since the tunnels were big enough for a saber-toothed tiger to crawl in, for example. So, unless they installed prehistoric security systems, this theory has holes. Haha, pun intended. The best bet is probably climate. Back then, everything was drier and colder, and some species of giant sloths were living their best lives back when Earth was transitioning between cold and warmer periods. Their big bodies usually protected these animals from temperature changes, but drastic fluctuations probably made them hide in order to survive. Besides, just like modern sloths, giant sloths probably had a hard time maintaining their body temperature, and going underground for a while is a great way to protect your babies and save some energy. After all, the bigger you are, the more energy you spend. Some scientists believe these tunnels might have had rotating tenants. One sloth moves in, digs a bit, leaves some scratch marks, moves out. And sometime later, another one crashes there and adds its own decor touches. A hostel for ancient megafauna. All evidence points to a more timeshare situation than a prehistoric private property. After all, these creatures weren't exactly social butterflies. Most sloths and armadillos usually keep things strictly one-on-one, just mom and baby. Yeah, dad sloth stuck around only for the good part. But you probably noticed one tiny detail here. These guys are not around anymore. They went extinct 11,000 years ago, right around the time humans started to get popular on Earth, when another ice age was ending. In fact, 80% of all mammals that were heavier than 2 pounds disappeared then. The first culprit is, of course, the usual suspect: humans. Around 10,000 years ago, a wave of skilled hunters using distinctive tools like spear points spread across North America. The theory goes that American animals weren't used to this new predator, making them easy targets. Once the big plant eaters started vanishing, the big meat eaters followed. They didn't have enough food to survive, and it wasn't just excessive hunting that caused some damage. Early humans may have also harmed ecosystems in ways that made survival harder for large species. But wait, there's another suspect: climate change. Around the same time, Earth's climate got a major shakeup. The climate was going from super cold to only slightly cold. Just so you know, Earth's temperature was about 46 degrees Fahrenheit, making seasons change and plants perish. And if plants are no longer around, big animals that eat them, like our friends giant sloths, have less nutrition, making them even more vulnerable. Many scientists now think that both human impact and climate change played a role, just in different ways depending on the region. In some places, humans may have tipped the balance. In others, nature itself did the job. Either way, it was a perfect storm that ended the age of giants. Turns out, being huge isn't always a plus. Giant animals tend to live longer and reproduce slowly, which makes them sitting ducks when disaster strikes. Besides, it takes a long time for these guys to bounce back. After dinos disappeared, for example, it took 15 million years for new mega mammals to stomp onto the scene. The last major extinction happened around 12,000 years ago. Not really enough time for brand new massive beasts to evolve. Today's biggest ground animals, like elephants, rhinos, and bison, aren't newcomers. They're actually the tough survivors of that ancient chaos. And, well, at least we still live alongside the blue whale, the biggest mammal ever. But why did some prehistoric animals get so gigantic in the first place? Well, being big has some perks, in spite of all the extinction thing. It keeps you safe from predators and helps you win the fight for food. If plant eaters bulked up, predators had to level up too, just to keep up. And the environment plays a big role. You see, cold-blooded animals might grow bigger in hot places to stay cool, and warm-blooded giants thrive in cold places to stay warm. One paleontologist even suggested that some dino-sized vegetarians needed those massive bellies just to digest the tough, woody plants of their time, as if they had a salad bar inside their bodies. There's also the thing with oxygen. Back then, Earth's atmosphere had way more of it. That's a big deal, especially for creatures with less efficient breathing systems like insects. Higher oxygen levels meant their bodies could handle more growth and more activity, kind of like nature's turbo mode. We also have to discuss bones, specifically the lighter ones. Many huge dinosaurs had air sacs built into their skeletons, just like modern birds. This made their bones strong but not ridiculously heavy, meaning they could grow super tall or long without collapsing under their own weight. Those air sacs also helped with cooling down, which is super important when you're basically a walking oven of muscle. On the flip side, modern mammals are limited by gravity and biology. Bigger bodies need stronger hearts, lungs, and blood pressure just to keep functioning, and land doesn't offer much support. This also explains why whales got even bigger than dinosaurs. The ocean acts like a natural support system, which pretty much means that buoyancy helps hold up all that mass. So blue whales can hit a jaw-dropping 330,000 pounds without turning into pancakes. On land, that kind of size would be a serious health hazard. So ancient giants weren't just freaks of nature. They were the result of the right mix of air, food, physics, and environment working together in just the right way. The whole extinction event surely is a bummer for giant sloths that worked as gigantic engineers of nature, but it surely prevented us from sharing the planet with insects the size of crows, like some types of griffinflies or millipedes reaching almost 6 feet in length. Yikes! Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to appreciate modern sloths. Slow, small, and thankfully incapable of terraforming the landscape and giving me insect-related panic attacks. Tunnels, metro, underground systems, and even secret passageways to the houses of the rich and famous. Why else do we need tunnels, you may wonder? To hide. Many cities have underground tunnels and even underground doppelgangers. Now let's make it clear. Those passages are normally not connected, contrary to the popular rumor claiming that it was possible to get from Scotland to Turkey using underground passageways built around 5,000 years ago. I mean, it sounds insane even today. Imagine building it back in the day. These tunnels have an official name, the Erdstall Tunnels, and they were most likely built in the Middle Ages. However, we still don't have the exact information about the date. The highest concentration of those tunnels are in Bavaria, Germany, but there are many of them in Great Britain and France too. Erdstall tunnels, a unique type of earthen passage found globally, are characterized by their narrow, oval-shaped corridors and tight choke points, known as schlups, or slip-outs. Despite speculation, their purpose remains a mystery. However, some of those tunnels have fireplaces and even vents, which might mean those were used primarily for shelter. Dating back to the Middle Ages, possibly as early as the 12th century, Erdstall tunnels lack archaeological signs and historical records, so it's not a surprise that there are many rumors about their use. Some scientists are sure those were storage spaces, though their narrowness makes this impractical. Another idea is that they provided hiding spots for farmers during tribal raids. However, their single entry point raises doubts about their effectiveness in evading threats. Now, if you're feeling like Indiana Jones and want to venture into those tunnels, you're in luck. A few structures, like the Erdstall Radkobluken in Austria, welcome visitors to explore these enigmatic structures. Most of them are closed to the public eye, though. The origins of Erdstall tunnels remain largely unknown, just like their real functions. And if you think, hey, it's the 21st century here, we can study pretty much everything, Well, you're wrong. What makes these tunnels hard to study are the tight confines. Traditional surveying methods often prove inadequate in such spaces. To solve this problem, scientists use a handheld device that integrates an RGB camera, a gyroscope, and high-resolution depth sensors, allowing them to capture intricate details of the tunnels. They also use modern techniques like 3D surveying in hopes of uncovering the true origins and purposes of those tunnels. One hypothesis even suggests they may have been poorly conceived dwellings, abandoned when their inadequacies became apparent. Still, not everyone quite agrees with this idea. Other theories suggest they served spiritual purposes, while the most intriguing idea speculates that those tunnels may be remnants of extraterrestrial civilizations. Experts believe they may have been used for practical matters, such as granaries or hiding spots from looters. As we don't have exact info on who built it and when, it may be pretty much anyone, even a sloth. Nope, I'm not a lunatic. Sloths can build giant tunnels. Check this out. In 2009, a farmer in southern Brazil was driving his tractor through a cornfield when it suddenly sank into the ground. He quickly discovered he had broken through the top of an underground tunnel. When researchers came to investigate, they found a tunnel around 6.5 feet high and the same 6.5 feet wide, extending about 50 feet long right beneath the farmer's house. When they looked closer, they instantly saw deep claw marks on the walls. That was the proof the tunnel wasn't human-made. So that thing the farmer uncovered was a megafauna paleoburrow, a prehistoric tunnel dug by ancient creatures like giant ground sloths or giant armadillos from over 10,000 years ago. I know, it's hard to imagine those beasts, but let me help you. Take a hamster. Now, increase it to the size of an elephant. Don't forget, this 13-foot tall hamster could also walk on 2 legs. During their time, around 15 million to 10,000 years ago, many species of sloths and giant armadillos roamed the Americas, some even digging similar tunnels. Today, many of these tunnels are filled with sediment, though some remain clear, similar to the one the farmer discovered. This 2009 find sparked significant interest, leading to the discovery of over 1,500 paleoburrows across southern Brazil, making it the era with the highest concentration of such sites worldwide. But no one knows exactly why there are so many of them in southern Brazil. While some paleoburrows exist throughout South America, none have been found in North America, which is weird since those huge sloths roamed the entire continent. The exact purpose of these large tunnels remains a mystery, but scientists believe they may have served as nursing spaces, temperature regulation, or hibernation areas. Tunnels likely developed over centuries as successive generations of sloths and armadillos expanded them. Now, let's take a look at fugus. No, not the Japanese fatal delicacy, and no, not a town in New Guinea. To see them, we gotta travel to the UK. So fugus are underground structures too, but they don't look exactly like tunnels. They are dry stone structures. They look as if a cave had been decorated with stones from the inside. There are only around 15 of them found so far, and most of them are located in Cornwall. According to the estimates, those tunnels were built about 2,400 years ago, and they're still in pristine condition, which is truly fascinating. I mean, back in the day, people had no cool machinery whatsoever, yet their structures still last. And if you dare to buy an apartment today, well, chances are you won't be too happy about the quality. Going back to our fugus, there's nothing extraordinary about their supposed purpose. They could be used for spiritual purposes, as a place to hide, or a food storage. The latest application, though, is a bit weird. I guess it's not a secret for anyone that England is famous for its excessive humidity. And if you want to store your food properly, you gotta avoid the humidity at all costs. Otherwise, say welcome to mold and fungi. But ancient people weren't dull-witted at all. or they wouldn't have survived, and you and I wouldn't be around now. So they might have adapted those fugus to store just some products, those that already had natural molds in them, assisting in the preservation of perishable food, like milk, butter, and cheese. But hey, those are just speculations. The true reason why they were built remains unknown. What makes fugus unique is that they are intentionally built tunnels, not just excavated mines like those in Wales. They were crafted by digging deep trenches, lining them with stone slabs, covering them with capstones, and then filling over them, all of which took significant time and effort. Still, no matter how hard those were to construct, cities around the globe are often built over intricate tunnel systems, each unique to its location. For instance, Paris is famous for its extensive underground quarries, which were abandoned years ago, but still pose a risk of collapse in certain areas above. London boasts one of the largest tunnel networks in the world, including many that were specifically created for military purposes. In New York City, there are rumors of secret tunnels, while Los Angeles has old tunnels from the Prohibition era used for speakeasies. Many other cities also have their share of enigmatic tunnels, and surprisingly, Florida is no exception. It happened in the year 2011 in Ybor City. Near a former post office, flooding uncovered something weird, a section of an unknown structure. Back then, people didn't pay much attention to that, so it took another 7 years to discover something truly fascinating. This historic neighborhood was founded in the 1880s, but it remained unknown until 2018 that it also has a hidden tunnel network. We only learned of it because of renovation work. The exact purpose, of course, is unknown, but most scientists are pretty sure that they serve to connect to early gaming spots and the port of Tampa. Figuring out how extensive the tunnel network is tricky. In 2018, a historic home in Seminole Heights revealed locked doors leading to tunnels from the 1920s. One local even said he traveled through a tunnel for 20 minutes. Rumors suggest some tunnels connect to the Hillsborough River and Ybor City. Research is ongoing, but no new info has emerged yet.
London, a bustling city of contrasts that never sleeps. Life is in full swing there, both on the surface, with almost 10 million people dwelling there, and underneath it. Now don't get me wrong, London rent did go crazy over the last few years, but people haven't started living underground, at least not yet. But it's safe to say there are actually two Londons. You know, the one with Big Ben, the Tower of London, and Greenwich, and secret tunnels and forgotten spaces that lie deep beneath the bustling streets of the city have something to show you too. It all starts with a white, unassuming door. To find it, you need to head to the eastbound platform of the Chancery Lane station on the London Underground. It doesn't seem to be hiding a big deal of secrets, but those who can open it know that behind it lies a maze of tunnels. Who knows, maybe this is the reason why Chancery Lane was closed a staggering 48 times from January to August 2023. And in 2022, it had 137 closures. That's more than a third of the entire year. They say the closures were due to all sorts of reasons, like staff shortages, naughty trespassers, and weather. But hey, it's a bit suspicious. So, the tunnels. They were built in the 1940s as shelters, later repurposed for cloak and dagger activities, storage of top-secret documents, and even telecom services. Rumor has it that the hotline between the most powerful states ran directly through these tunnels. These are called the Kingsway Exchange Tunnels, and they're located 130 feet below street level in central London, underneath High Holborn. It used to be very secret-y. Ian Fleming, the guy who created James Bond and actually spent some time working at that place, got inspired by it and created the whole Q operations in the James Bond movies. The General Post Office took over in 1949, and by 1956, it turned into the place where the first transatlantic telephone cable terminated. Over the years, it was home to post office engineers and radio interference investigators. The place even had the deepest bar in the UK. It used to serve drinks for the big shots, but it's closed now. The thing is, by the 1990s, it had been mostly abandoned due to asbestos and other safety concerns. But you may get the chance to sip a drink at Britain's deepest licensed bar pretty soon. Here's the deal. In 2023, the London Tunnel swooped in to save the day. They bought the tunnels and have big plans to turn them into an interactive cultural experience for the public. With a projected opening in 2027, this place is set to become a hotspot for history buffs and curious adventurers alike. And let's not forget the cool entrances, from a secret shopfront on High Holborn to a mysterious goods lift on Furnival Street. Sadly, the entrance at Tooks Court is no more, but hey, that just adds to the mystery, right? Now, if you don't feel like waiting for several years to visit the Nether London, there's another way of seeing the other side of the city. Now, there's a small downside to it, as the tour might be a little, stinky. Do you know that beneath the streets of London, there is a maze of 1,200 miles of brick tunnels for raw sewage? That's a whole lot of pipes. And don't forget about the 80 miles of main sewers, big enough to pass for railway tunnels. Back in the day, when London was a hot spot for cholera outbreaks, the city was facing a real crisis. People were falling ill, and no one knew what to do. But the problem was that all the waste that Londoners produced went straight into the Thames, the main source of water in the city. So all the cooking, cleaning, and other activities involving water were done with the Thames' terribly dirty water. Enter Sir Joseph Bazalgette, the man with a plan. This genius engineer designed a new sewage system that saved the day. No more sewage turning the Thames into a cesspool. Bazalgette's pumping stations were like something out of a steampunk novel, massive and magnificent. Fast forward to today, and London's old sewer system is feeling the strain. With the number of people living in the city getting close to 10 million, it's time for an upgrade. That's where the Thames Tideway Tunnel comes in, a super sewer to the rescue. It'll be like a giant underground highway for waste, the construction of which was completed in March of the 2024 year. And while you can't really travel in the Victorian sewage, there is an underground world you can visit in London, but it's not for free. It won't cost you much, just as much as one metro ride. The London Underground is the pioneer of underground railways. Imagine, it's the 19th century and they're building the Metropolitan Railway, the very first underground railway in the world. Sure thing, it used to look very different from those cozy carriages they have in London now. It all started way back in 1863 with wooden carriages and steam locomotives. In the 1900s, things really started heating up underground. The City and South London Railway kicked things off with electric trains, followed by the Waterloo and City Railway, Central London Railway, and Great Northern and City Railway. It was electrification mania down there. The Underground Electric Railways Company of London came onto the scene, bringing to life a bunch of tube lines, for example, the Bakerloo, Piccadilly, and Hampstead lines. Now, the London Underground is affectionately called the Tube because of its tube-shaped tunnels. It's not the only underground-related nickname the Londoners have. When the Central Line Railway was introduced in 1900, it was playfully dubbed the Twopenny Tube because tickets only cost 2 pennies. And that fun nickname has been with us ever since, adding a little extra charm to our daily commute. More than 1 billion journeys are taken on the London Underground every year. That's over 5 million journeys each day. Surprisingly, the biggest part of the Underground isn't actually underground. Out of the 270 stations, only 45% are below the surface. Oopsies, turns out it's not that Nether London I was talking about. Whatever. Do you know that the iconic tube map was inspired by a circuit board? Harry Beck, the designer, broke the map mold and created a cool and colorful diagram that still helps us navigate the underground today. The tube is quite royal as well. Queen Elizabeth II was the first royal to ride the tube in 1969 when she opened the Victoria Line, and she hopped on a few times since then. Every single day, people forget something on the tube. Some weird stuff has been left there over the years: a judge's wig, a prosthetic leg, even an urn of ashes. Oops, did somebody forget Grandpa? Another fun fact is that penalty fares weren't a thing until 1994. Fare dodging used to be a common practice before that, but now those caught are fined 10 pounds on the spot. Also, there's a fake house on the underground track. It's hiding part of the track that was demolished back in 1868 when the district line opened. The neighbors weren't too happy about the gap, so they built a facade to match the rest of the houses on the street. And get this, the shortest distance between two adjacent stations is only 850 feet. It's between the Covent Garden and Leicester Square on the Piccadilly line, and it's a super quick journey that's still popular with visitors. The first escalator was introduced at Earl's Court in 1911. People were so scared of it that they didn't trust its safety. Legend has it that a man named William Bumper Harris, with a wooden leg, rode the escalator all day to prove it was safe. Pretty wild, huh?
Whenever you hear about ancient ruins, you almost never picture them being suspended somewhere, or just randomly hanging on the branch of a tree, right? In fact, for most of the ancient artifacts we have exposed in museums all over the world, archaeologists did quite an impressive amount of digging. You see, buildings have this funny way of fading away over time if not properly taken care of. Sometimes we need to reuse some building materials, so an older construction may be sacrificed in the process. Other times, houses are abandoned, and once they are exposed to the elements on the surface, like rain or sunlight, they don't really stand a chance. Some just simply crumble away due to good old erosion. So the only way a piece of architecture can survive the test of time is if it's somehow gotten buried deep down. Now, how did they end up buried in the first place? Well, it's quite the comedy of errors. Ancient cities had a habit of gradually raising their ground level like a kid adding toppings to their ice cream sundae. You see, these settlements were always busy collecting food and building materials to keep up with their ever-growing population. But hey, who has time to deal with waste and rubbish? It wasn't exactly high on their to-do list back in the day. So when it came to building new houses, ancient civilizations found it much easier to save their sweat and tears by piling up the rubble and constructing right on top. But that's not all. Rivers would also occasionally flood and deposit a layer of sediment on the city floors, further encapsulating those ancient constructions. And in those dry regions like the desert, where the wind likes to show off its sand and dust dance moves, you can bet it was a constant struggle to keep the establishments clean. One hilarious example is the Sphinx, which had its head buried in sand until a group of archaeologists unearthed it in 1817. Some ancient towns eventually got covered up because they were completely abandoned. With less human activity to control their expansion, plant seeds couldn't resist the opportunity and sprouted all over the place. They gobbled up carbon dioxide from the air and grew, adding more and more bulk to the ground. Those cheeky roots even decided to stabilize the soil made from decaying plant matter, creating layers upon layers of earthy goodness. It's like the ultimate DIY project Mother Nature embarked on, with plants as her loyal helpers. The act of digging into the secrets of ancient civilizations is not just about unearthing a lost world. It's also an epic quest to reveal the hidden treasures beneath layers of history. But how do archaeologists know where to dig in the first place? If everything is covered in layers upon layers of sediments, debris, and plant roots, they must have some sort of system they rely on before embarking on a new project, right? For starters, they're not always the ones suggesting an archaeological dig in a certain location. Let me explain. Let's say you're a contractor and you want to build a new fancy apartment complex in your city. Some local legislations have certain requirements before your project can start, though. For instance, before anyone starts building on a piece of land, they might need to bring in specialists to check the soil. These clever folks can be archaeologists, geologists, or paleontologists, and they need to keep an eye on things during development. If any artifacts or ecofacts, fancy word for organic remnants, are discovered, these experts swoop in to excavate and study them. But what about sites that have nothing to do with bulldozers and yellow hats? Archaeologists have more than one trick up their sleeves when it comes to locating ancient hotspots. They dive deep into historic records with a healthy dose of detective work. By sniffing out old documents and maps, they can piece together the puzzle of human activity in a specific area. If a site has been visited before, it's even better. Finding records of past excavations or historical accounts can give archaeologists lots of information on where to continue their treasure hunt. Before archaeologists start swinging their shovels, they engage in a bit of a visual scan mission. Armed with a grid system, they'll stroll around the site, keeping their eyes peeled for any artifacts that might be hiding just beneath the Earth's upper layer. From groundstone tools to historic glass and even ancient garbage dumps, yes, they're all so valuable. These keen-eyed explorers can spot signs of human activity faster than most people. If they stumble upon midden soil, fancy term for a garbage dump, they know for sure that humans once called this place home. Archaeologists don't just rely on their trusty shovels, though. They have an arsenal of gadgets to aid in their search for hidden wonders. Geophysical tools are like their secret weapons. Take the resistivity meter, for example. This clever contraption measures the electrical component of the soil and any buried features or artifacts. A buried wall, for instance, will create a different resistivity reading than the surrounding soil. Magnetometers and ground-penetrating radar work in similar ways, showcasing potential hints of ancient treasures in the soil. And who could forget our trusty old friend, the GPS? It helps archaeologists map out precise locations, like a high-tech treasure map, leading them straight to their pot of gold. Care to virtually visit some of the most important archaeological sites in the world? Well, follow me. In the United Kingdom, for instance, you'll find this interesting place called Stonehenge. It's one of many henges scattered around, but this one really takes the cake. Picture this: massive ancient stones standing tall and proud, arranged in a funky outer ring and an inner horseshoe, with some smaller stones thrown in for good measure. And guess what? These amazing stones have been around for over 5,000 years. Talk about a serious case of rock-solid longevity. Now, here's where it gets interesting. According to local folklore, the legendary wizard Merlin whipped out his magic wand and poof! He teleported these massive stones all the way from Ireland. Apparently, some giants had assembled them there, but Merlin decided they would look much better at their new location. Others think it's just the ruined remains of an old Roman spiritual edifice. These amazing structures were built by our Bronze Age ancestors. With their simple tools and limited tech, they managed to create this monumental masterpiece. Impressive, right? Unfortunately, there's still so much we don't know about this area. Stonehenge's initial purpose remains a mystery to this day. Sure, there are lots of theories, but scientists have yet to agree on the subject. However, we do know that it's perfectly aligned to catch the sunrise during the summer and winter solstices. The ancient city of Pompeii is an equally amazing archaeological site. Picture this: Mount Vesuvius, a notorious troublemaker, decided to throw a volcanic tantrum and completely covered this ancient Roman city. It turned it into a time capsule, located outside present-day Naples in Italy. Fast forward to the year 1748, when a bunch of adventurous explorers stumbled upon Pompeii. Lo and behold, they discovered a treasure trove of well-preserved goodies: streets, houses, food. Probably a bit stale by then. Blingy jewelry, fancy sculptures, colorful frescoes, everyday household items, and even animal and human remains. It was like an epic archaeological party. From the looks of it, Pompeii had it all. Fancy houses and villas, a massive 20,000-seat arena, cute little artisan shops, hangouts like taverns. And let's not forget the saucy spots like those luxurious bathhouses for some intense pampering. There's also the Sanctuary of Apollo, where people used to gather for their daily dose of worship. And of course, the bustling heart of the city, the Forum of Pompeii, where all the cool people used to hang out. And guess what? Pompeii is so cool that it made it to UNESCO's World Heritage List back in 1997. That's like the ultimate Hall of Fame for historical awesomeness. It also includes many other famous buildings and sites, like the Taj Mahal in India and the Acropolis of Athens in Greece.
So, you've just finished your sightseeing tour of Edinburgh, Scotland, or Scotland. It lasted just under an hour, and you're hungry for more. You ask your guide if there's anything else to see, and they start talking about a mysterious underground city. You ask how long it takes to get there, and you're shocked by the guide's answer. You're standing on it. It's right under your feet. South Bridge? but you were just there and didn't notice a giant arrow pointing down. So this is where the mystery starts. The story begins in the mid-1700s. The Scottish capital wasn't as big as it is today. Only 60,000 people lived around Edinburgh Castle. All of them were packed inside medieval walls, and they say today's cities are overpopulated. Get a load of the living conditions back then. The buildings were tall, so there was little natural light. Some houses had 14 stories. Cows walked the narrow winding streets, and livestock. Things were so bad that the famous English writer Daniel Defoe noted, "I believe that in no city in the world so many people have so little room." Yep, that's the guy who wrote Robinson Crusoe. Well, something just had to be done. The solution was to build 2 long bridges to the north and to the south of the city. The names they gave the bridges were more descriptive than colorful. The bridge to the north was completed first. In 1785, construction on the second bridge got underway. It was going to connect the main pedestrian street in the north with the university buildings in the south of Edinburgh. But don't think of this construction as a modern bridge over a river. It was more of a viaduct, a type of bridge that connects 2 hills across a valley. The word viaduct comes from Latin, as Romans were pioneers in building these structures. Their capital was built on 7 hills. And just to be copycats, Edinburgh also straddled 7 major hills. Only 2 are visible today because the city has been built up. Now, back in the 18th century, the construction of the South Bridge was a remarkable feat of engineering. It took the builders only 3 years to complete it. 19 stone arches spanned a chasm that was 31 feet at its deepest point, and the length over 1,000 feet. Impressive, even for today's standards. But what does a 2.5 centuries old viaduct have to do with an underground city? Well, it is the city. You see, they designed Southbridge to be hollow on the inside. As you walk along this street today, there is actually a huge human-made cave beneath your feet. The popular name for this set of chambers is the Edinburgh Vaults. But what was the purpose of this space? And is there something or someone there now? Well, let's take it one step at a time. The builder's original intention was for these vaults to serve as merchant shops. At first, it worked out fine. Merchants used a total of 120 vaults as shops and warehouses. There were workshops, cobblers, and taverns. But as time went by, a major design flaw came to light. The stone was leaking, and the vaults were damp all the time. There was even flooding. The builders forgot to waterproof the structure. The merchants feared the water would damage their precious goods. After just a couple of years, the first tenants started moving out. Once legal trade moved away from the vaults, the city's poor moved in. And not only them, but all sorts of shady characters. Historians don't know much about this period, since there are no written records. But even the squatters had to leave soon. If you couldn't do business in these vaults, how could you live in them? It was damp and cold, and there was no ventilation, sanitation, or natural light. It really stunk. Every real estate agent's worst nightmare. Just 30 years after their completion, the Southbridge vaults were abandoned once and for all. But at a street level, business was as usual. The officials decided to fill the vaults with rubble for security purposes. Buried and forgotten, the memory of a once teeming merchant quarter of Edinburgh slowly faded from people's minds. Now, this is where the story gets a bit weird. During the 1980s, a Scottish rugby player accidentally found a tunnel leading into the vaults. The athlete didn't waste any time and started excavating the vaults with the help of his son. Several tons of rubble, and a decade later, the Southbridge vaults have been restored to their former glory, so to speak. They were again dark and damp as they were back in the 1700s. There were many interesting finds in this underground city. The vaults were littered with oyster shells, which were the standard diet for a working-class resident of Edinburgh at the time. Other finds, such as shoes and empty bottles, suggested that people actually lived in these claustrophobic vaults. think of this the next time you see someone trying to rent their garage as an apartment. So, your guide was right. There really is a hidden city under the streets of Edinburgh. Well, at least one street. You have now gone down from the main pedestrian street into Cowgate. You look up and there it is, the only visible arch of the once impressive bridge. You are now searching online to book a tour of the vaults. You just have to see this place with your own eyes. But the Scottish capital isn't the only city with a mysterious underground. The historic region of Cappadocia in central Turkey hides no less than 36 cities beneath the ground. The biggest and the most impressive one wasn't discovered until 1963. It was built during the Byzantine era to protect the local population from invaders. We have similar structures made out of concrete in our cities, but the level of the Turkish underground city is really impressive. There are several levels, like in a multi-story car garage. The caves and tunnels lie 197 feet underground. That's 2/3 of the Statue of Liberty's height. The city could house 20,000 people at any given time, complete with livestock and food. The smell. Anyway, 20,000 is the average attendance at Major League Soccer matches today. You might want to add a field trip to one of these places the next time you go to Turkey. Most of these cities in Cappadocia can be found in rural areas. Makes sense, right? After all, they were dug out as hiding places. But in Europe, there is one city whose underground labyrinth resembles the vaults of Edinburgh. You've probably heard of Pilsen in the Czech Republic. But hold on a second, this isn't going to be a story of the most famous local product. Something brewed, perhaps? It's the story of a medieval city that survived underneath the streets of Pilsen. Water wells, cellars, and passageways stretch for more than 12 miles. Merchants and craftspeople used Pilsen's historical underground for storage. Water, food, ice, you name it. The waterworks are pretty impressive. Historians estimate that 360 wells are located under Pilsen's historical town center. In times of instability, the passageways served as safe havens for the locals. They definitely didn't go thirsty down there. Today, most tourists visit these mysterious underground cities. But in Canada, there's one where people live and work. The construction of Montreal's underground city began in 1962. The initial idea was to shelter traffic. That's a nice way to say that city officials were building a metro station. The idea caught on and the project expanded. Now, it's a real-life urban maze hidden under the downtown area. Need a place to stay? There are hotels down there. Want to grab a bite? Step into one of the underground restaurants. Multiple shops, a library, cinemas, the list is long. There are even residential complexes. But how can people live under the ground? Simple. Although the city itself lies beneath the earth, the access points are at ground level. You can enter the 20-mile-long tunnel network at more than 120 places. Oh, that's another place down under. Oops, sorry, Australia.
The conditions on this mysterious island might teach us how we can live on Mars one day. Devon Island is, to this day, the largest uninhabited island on our planet. It's located in the Canadian Arctic archipelago, and it's easy to see why people find it impossible to make a home here. The soil stays frozen throughout the seasons. The eastern part of the island is covered by a thick ice cap all year round. Summers here last for less than 50 days, and by summer, I mean that the ground is snow-free and the temperatures are slightly over 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Since almost no plants are growing here, there are no animals that could have adapted to these conditions. That's why scientists compare this island to what it would be like to live on Mars. In 2001, a project started here on Devon Island looking to discover how people might live and work on other planets, particularly on Mars. It's called the Houghton Mars Project and offered NASA scientists some unique studying opportunities. There are few options here in terms of logistics and transportation, and communicating with people living outside the island is also a bit more difficult. Specialists believe that if we can find solutions to live here, we might be able to do it on Mars too. Think of it as a home-based outer space boot camp. The Pitcairn Islands can be found in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. If you're a fan of adventures and remote places, this is the place to be. But you'll need to buckle up for quite the ride, since no plane has ever reached this place. The only way to reach the Pitcairn Islands is to take a 32-hour yacht ride. No wonder only 50 people are known to live here. Its history is really interesting too. A group of people settled here in the 18th century after a failed marine mission. To this day, all the residents of the island are descending from that initial group. Life's not easy here though. If they need to see a doctor, for example, they need to travel either to the island of Fiji or to New Zealand. Now let's head over to Mexico, where recent technology has allowed scientists to explore some fascinating cenotes, which were previously unknown. Cenotes are also called sinkholes and allow us to see subterranean water bodies. A team of archaeologists, cave divers, underwater photographers, and biologists came together to explore and document the extensive network of sinkholes located in the Yucatan Peninsula. One of the hotspots is located under the main pyramid at the Chichen Itza archaeological site. In total, scientists are looking to explore about 6,000 cenotes stretched across this whole region. The whole project is important not only because of the geological discoveries, but also because of its connection to the Mayan people and their culture. These recent discoveries revealed that for the Mayans, these cenotes weren't simple water sources. They dictated the way they built their constructions and had a huge impact on their spiritual lives too. The tallest mountain in the world is Mount Everest, sure, but it's been explored by scientists and tourists alike and doesn't hold many secrets. The mysterious Gangkhar Puensum, on the other hand, is the tallest unclimbed mountain on our planet. The reason behind this unusual situation is not because of its remoteness or harsh conditions. Rather, because it's against local legislation to climb it. It's located in the South Asian territory of Bhutan, and the name of the mountain translates to the White Peak of the Three Spiritual Brothers. Local tradition dictates that mountain peaks shouldn't be available to humans and need to be left to the higher spirits. Mountains in this region can only be climbed up to 3.7 miles, but Gangkhar Puensum tops 4.7 miles. For this reason, there's no official record of any human reaching the peak. Almost all of the previous expeditions have been inexplicably stopped at the midpoint. The next unusual spot should be on any travel enthusiast's bucket list, the island of Madagascar. For starters, it's estimated that about 90% of the species of plants and animals that are found here can't be seen anywhere in the world. But there's one small portion of the island that has baffled both tourists and scientists, the Stone Forest. It belongs to the Tsingy de Bemaraha National Park and features some unique limestone formations. They look like thousands of spiky towers that stretch hundreds of feet into the air. The distance between these formations can be anywhere from a few inches to the length of a city street. As beautiful as it is, it's really hard to get here. It'll take you a few days to get there from the nearest city. Once you get to the park, it becomes really difficult to explore too. It can take a whole day to go across as little as half a mile. The word Tsingys itself translates to where one cannot walk barefoot. To visit the remotest village in the whole world, you'll need to prepare yourself for quite the journey. From the United States, for example, the easiest route involves a 15-hour flight to Cape Town, South Africa, followed by a 6-day boat ride to reach Tristan da Cunha. Or you could take a month-long cruise through the South Atlantic Ocean, whatever works better. Planning in advance is a must, since only 9 boat visits are made to the island yearly. It's just 7 miles long and right in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, stretching a mere 37.8 square miles. There are slightly over 200 residents, and they all farm for a living. They do have internet service, but it's really slow. The people living here speak a dialect of English that is used by the fewest number of people in the world. The town of Coober Pedy in Australia is partially underground. It all began back in 1915, when opal deposits were found in the area. To this day, the town is still the biggest opal mine in the world. People living here figured out that it would be more comfortable for them to stick to the underground, as temperatures above ground can reach 125 degrees Fahrenheit. So, the establishment now has underground stores and galleries. Coober Pedy is also home to the world's first 4-star underground hotel. North Sentinel Island, located near India, is another pretty remote place. Not because of the time it takes to get there or the climate, but because it's home to the world's most mysterious tribe. The population living here is estimated to be between 50 to 400 people and isn't known to have any contact with the outer world. This is mostly because locals don't really enjoy visitors and tend to scare them away, even harming tourists. So, to protect them and their obvious wishes, the island is monitored by the local Indian authorities. It's believed the tribe's people don't have any immunity from modern diseases, so being in contact with foreign people might actually be fatal for the locals. On these French islands, there are no native inhabitants. The Kerguelen Islands are part of the Antarctic lands and are home to just scientists that visit on rotation. At any given time of the year, there are no more than 100 people here, and they're mostly engineers and researchers. There's no plane to get you to these islands, and few tourists are known to have visited them. The island is covered in glaciers, and the soil here isn't friendly to plants or animals. But if you're curious about what this place looks like, you'll need both the money and the time to complete the trip. You can only reach the island by ship, which reaches the shores of Kerguelen only 4 times a year. It isn't cheap to stay in these islands, and you definitely won't find 5-star hotels here. The trip departs from Réunion, and it takes about 28 days to reach the first island. Half of the time will be spent at sea, so be prepared to cover over 5,600 miles of the Indian Ocean.
We know more about space than we do about the ocean. We know more about the ocean than we do about the Earth's core. But how do we study something that lies more than 1,000 miles beneath our feet? Oddly enough, you need to fly into space. Thanks to satellites orbiting the planet, scientists have discovered something strange at the very heart of the planet. News about mysterious signals from space barely surprises anyone, but how about this? We detected strange signals coming from deep beneath our own home. Before we go into those signals, we need to understand why it's so important to study what's inside the planet. How does the core affect us? Our lives depend on it in several crucial ways. First, the core plays a fundamental role in gravity. We don't drift off into space because a massive spherical mass of molten metal locks us to the surface. Second, it powers Earth's magnetic field. Dangerous cosmic radiation and solar wind that could scorch everything are blocked thanks to the planet's magnetic field. And third, the inner processes of the Earth influence earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Any disturbance inside the core and mantle can change life on the planet. And recently, scientists recorded something unusual coming from down there. At the beginning of this century, the United States and Germany launched a mission called GRACE, the Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment. At first, this project used 2 satellites to track how water moved around the planet and how glaciers were melting. But the satellites could also measure Earth's gravitational field. If gravity was slightly stronger or weaker in some region, one of the satellites would be pulled toward that spot, and the other would measure the change in distance. In very simple terms, the heavier something is, the stronger its gravitational pull. In certain parts of the planet, gravity can be slightly higher because of large geological shifts, ocean currents, or melting ice. But between 2006 and 2008, the GRACE satellites detected a strange change in gravity along the coast of Africa. Melting ice, water movement, and other natural phenomena couldn't explain the anomaly. No one knew what it was at the time, but years later, scientists suggested that the nature of this signal was coming from the Earth's core. Researchers noticed that some minerals, like perovskite, can undergo a phase transition when exposed to enormous pressure and extreme heat. And there are many perovskites lying in the upper layers of the mantle. When the internal structure of this mineral reshapes, it becomes denser and shifts the surrounding rocks. Deep underground, this harder, solid part moves the softer molten rock. These movements reach the molten outer core and slightly deform it. This deformation inside the core alters the flow of molten iron, and this deep current of liquid metal directly affects Earth's magnetic field. That's why satellites recorded those fluctuations. So how does all of this affect us? We launch satellites, we use compasses, we rely on GPS. All of this works only because gravity and the magnetic field are stable, and both depend on the core. That's why it's so important to study the Earth's heart. And to do that, we don't need to dig thousands of miles. Movements on the surface can reveal what is happening inside. Studying vibrations in the crust, recording gravitational shifts, calculating, modeling, and forming hypotheses. It all sounds a little boring. Is there another way to figure out what's happening down there? We sent Voyagers into space, and some of them have already left the solar system. We descend into the depths of the Mariana Trench inside bathyskiffs. So what's the problem with drilling a shaft deep into the Earth's crust? Humanity actually has some experience with this. In the 1970s, Soviet geologists began drilling the Kola Super Deep borehole. It became and remains the deepest artificial borehole ever created. Its depth reaches 7.6 miles, deeper than the Mariana Trench and higher than Mount Everest. More than 50 years have passed, and humanity has not gone deeper than 7.6 miles. And do you know where the Earth's core begins? At about 1,800 miles down. That's almost 7 times farther than the distance to the International Space Station. To reach the core, we would need to drill a hole 230 times deeper than the Kola Super Deep. But that project was shut down in 1992, and the borehole was closed in 2005. What stopped us from digging deeper? First, the density of the rock. In the early stages, the drill easily cut through granite, but around 4.3 miles down, the rock became much harder. The drill broke several times. Workers had to change the drilling direction to pass through softer layers. Eventually, the borehole shape looked like a string of lights hanging on a Christmas tree. Another problem was heat. The deeper the engineers went, the hotter it became. Scientists expected that past a depth of 10,000 feet, the temperature would be around 212 degrees Fahrenheit. In reality, the harder they worked, the worse it got. Eventually, it reached 356 degrees Fahrenheit. The hottest place on Earth is the Sonoran Desert along the Mexican-US border. Temperatures there can reach 177 degrees Fahrenheit. That's twice as cool as inside that terrifying borehole. And the challenges did not stop there. At a depth of about 14,800 feet, the rock became porous. The extreme heat gave it a strange plasticity. Instead of solid stone, the drill had to cut through something more like hot, softened material that was almost impossible to drill. On top of that, the stability of the shaft became a danger. At such depths, the walls could collapse at any moment. To drill deeper, humanity would need completely new technology, a drill capable of working at 500 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the temperature scientists expect in the upper mantle, located just beneath the crust. And to reach it, we would need to drill 25 miles down, almost 3 times deeper than the Kola Super Deep. There are many rumors about what the engineers supposedly discovered in that hole. The most popular claim is that they heard the screams of thousands of people who were stuck in the fiery underworld. Other fake stories claim that the workers went insane after seeing something horrific at the bottom, and that's why the project was stopped. But if we ignore these myths, what did scientists actually find? They learned that the existing temperature model of Earth's interior was wrong. It was far hotter down there than expected. Geologists thought they would find the so-called Conrad discontinuity, a transition from granite to basalt. They found no such boundary. The real discovery was a liquid at incredible depths. Scientists found cracks filled with briny water. This changed our understanding of the crust. People used to believe it was completely solid, but now it appears full of fractures and channels through which water can move. Where did it come from? Geologists think the fluid was squeezed out of the rocks by enormous pressure, as water is wrung out of a sponge. But the most astonishing discovery was life. At about 4.5 miles down, engineers found ancient fossils of single-celled marine organisms. They were nearly 2 billion years old, and they had survived at such extreme heat and pressure. Let's imagine that one day we actually reach the mantle. What would that give us? What would we expect to see? We would finally understand how Earth formed billions of years ago, how the core, mantle, and crust developed, and how plate tectonics works. We'd know how the plates push and pull against each other. We'd gain a deeper understanding of earthquakes. Researchers also hope to find extremophiles. These are primitive organisms that can withstand extreme heat and pressure. If we discover life near the mantle or even within it, scientists will study it closely and try to understand how it manages to survive under such brutal conditions. If we learn what keeps life alive in the most hostile environment beneath our feet, we might learn how to protect life in other extreme places. From the depths of the ocean to distant planets, studying the heart of our planet could reveal technologies we can barely imagine today. Our future might depend on the mysteries hidden beneath our own world. Scientists discovered the largest water reservoir in the Oregon Cascades. It's hiding underground, holding more than twice the water volume of Lake Mead. Let me specify. It contains at least 19.4 cubic miles of water, which is almost 162 trillion bottles of water. If you drank one bottle a day, it would take you around 444 billion years to finish your stock. No wonder this underground aquifer discovery is so awesome. The Cascade Mountain Range, which contains the largest aquifer on Earth, stretches about 700 miles from Northern California to British Columbia. The high Cascades in Oregon have younger volcanic rocks, around 8 million years old. The Western Cascades are much older, 45 million years. They boast deep canyons and valleys. Scientists study the transition zone between these two areas to understand how water moved through volcanic rock and how volcanic processes had evolved over time. In the process, researchers measured rock temperatures at different depths. That's when the underground aquifer discovery happened. Normally, deeper rocks should be hotter because it's closer to the Earth's interior. But to everyone's surprise, in several areas, the temperature stayed the same even at greater depths. Well, this was a strong clue that water was flowing through the rock and cooling it down. In other words, the Cascades function like a natural water tower, storing and slowly releasing water into rivers and streams. These geological water findings are important for two main reasons. First, it's our potential water source for the future. Such a massive amount of water stored underground could be an important resource. So far, we don't know how long it will remain in its current state and how resilient it's going to be to changes. So, we need more research to properly manage its use. Secondly, it affects volcanic activity. When water seeps deep underground and reaches magma, it instantly turns into steam, creating extreme pressure that can trigger explosive volcanic eruptions. Understanding how much water is stored in volcanic rock could help predict future eruptions and the risks they pose. Now, even though this discovery is exciting, there are still many unanswered questions. Like, how does this water move through the volcanic rock? Or how much of it is actually usable as a water resource? Since this underground reservoir depends on rain and snow, a series of dry years could cause big problems for both water supply and volcanic stability. Researchers are now working to understand the full impact of the Cascades volcanic water reservoir and how to manage it responsibly. But let's look closely at the geological wonder that is the Cascade Range. Picture this, a massive mountain range stretching all the way from Northern California up to British Columbia, cutting right through the middle of Oregon. That's the mountain range we're talking about. In Oregon alone, it's about 260 miles long and up to 90 miles wide, covering 17,000 square miles. Whoa, that's bigger than each of the 9 smallest US states. The coolest thing is that the Oregon part of this mountain range is basically built by volcanoes, and apparently contains at least one volcanic rock water storage. The range itself exists because of something called the Cascadia Subduction Zone, where the Juan de Fuca tectonic plate, a chunk of Earth's crust under the Pacific Ocean, is slowly getting shoved beneath North America. As it sinks, the intense heat and pressure force water out of the oceanic rock. It lowers the melting point of the surrounding mantle and creates magma. That magma rises up and fuels the Cascade volcanoes. This is part of the Ring of Fire, the giant belt of volcanoes circling the Pacific. So, in a way, the Cascades are part of a much bigger volcanic system that's constantly shifting and changing. The Oregon Cascades are actually made up of 2 completely different zones, the Western Cascades and the High Cascades, and they look nothing alike. The Western Cascades are the older part. They formed around 45 million years ago. These mountains are rugged and deeply carved up by rivers. Some canyons are as deep as 3,700 feet. This part of the range used to be volcanically active, but over time, erosion has taken over, reshaping the land. The High Cascades, on the other hand, are much younger and way less eroded. Around 8 million years ago, the volcanic activity shifted, and new eruptions filled in old canyons, smoothing out the landscape. Eruptions kept piling up fresh lava, and rivers in this region didn't have as much time to create deep valleys like they did in the Western Cascades. That's why if you look at the 2 regions side by side, one looks jagged and carved up, while the other looks smoother and more built up. Some of Oregon's most famous volcanoes are located in the High Cascades. I'm talking about Mount Hood, Mount Jefferson, the Three Sisters, and Crater Lake, which actually formed when Mount Mazama erupted and collapsed in on itself. Unlike smaller volcanoes that pop up, erupt for a bit, and disappear over a few months or years, these giant volcanic centers have been active for thousands of years. And because they've been around for so long, they have way more complex magma systems. They produce everything from basalt, which is a runny, fast-moving lava, to andesite, dacite, and rhyolite. And rhyolite is the type of magma that leads to huge explosive eruptions. So while some of these volcanoes might just ooze lava, others have the potential for devastating blasts. Another amazing thing about these long-lived volcanoes is that their underground magma chambers stay hot for a really long time. That's why the Cascades are one of the best places to tap into geothermal energy. There's a ton of heat just sitting beneath the surface, waiting to be used. Oh, and don't forget about the Cascades volcanic water reservoir. Who knows how we will use it in the future? Now, we already know that the Cascades are part of the magnificent Ring of Fire, Earth's most explosive zone. Imagine a massive horseshoe-shaped belt wrapping around the Pacific Ocean, stretching for about 25,000 miles. It's one of the most geologically active areas on the planet. This is where Earth's tectonic plates are constantly shifting, colliding, and grinding against each other, creating some of the world's most powerful earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and deep ocean trenches. The Ring of Fire follows the meeting points of multiple tectonic plates, and they all surround the giant Pacific Plate. These plates aren't just sitting still, they're always on the move, pushing against or sliding beneath each other at their boundaries, known as fault lines. When this happens, you get everything from deep-sea trenches to towering volcanoes and violent earthquakes. One of the most extreme examples of this activity is the Mariana Trench, located east of Guam. At 7 miles deep, it's the deepest ocean trench on Earth. It was formed by a process called subduction, where one tectonic plate is forced beneath another, sinking deep into the Earth's mantle. The Mariana Trench is one of the most mysterious places on Earth. It's insanely deep, with crushing pressure and total darkness. So for a long time, people thought nothing could live down there. But it turned out that life existed even at the very bottom. In 2005, scientists found a tiny single-celled organism in the Challenger Deep, the deepest part of the Mariana Trench. They also came across colorful rocky formations and weird sea cucumbers. The Mariana Trench also has hydrothermal vents, which are basically underwater hot springs. Even though the water there is super hot and acidic, strange creatures and microscopic life forms still manage to survive there. The Ring of Fire is also responsible for 90% of the world's earthquakes. Some of the most powerful quakes in history have happened here, including the 1960 Valdivia earthquake in Chile, the strongest ever recorded, which hit a mind-boggling 9.5 on the Richter scale. But it's not just about earthquakes. The Ring of Fire is also home to about 75% of the planet's volcanoes. Some of the most famous eruptions in history have come from this region, like the infamous Mount Tambora in Indonesia. In short, the Ring of Fire is one of the most dangerous places on Earth, but it's also incredibly fascinating. Who knows what else scientists might discover in that region, like they discovered the largest water reservoir in the Cascades.
Deep inside our planet, there are two massive blobs of rock that have puzzled scientists for years. They sit deep inside, opposite each other. One lurks under the Pacific Ocean, the other under Africa. And they're so weird, they even make seismic waves slow down. Their actual name is Large Low-Velocity Provinces, but they're just two enormous, mysterious blobs of rock, bigger than continents, stranger than anything else inside the Earth, and so dense they might be leftovers from another planet. Until recently, no one knew what they were, where they came from, or why they even exist. These mysterious blobs could hold the secret to Earth's deepest forces, powerful enough to shape earthquakes, drive volcanic eruptions, and even influence the evolution of life itself. And now, we might finally learn the truth about them. These geological monsters are hidden about 1,800 miles beneath the surface. Each one is 100 times taller than Mount Everest, so vast they defy explanation. Now, at first, scientists thought these were primordial remnants from Earth's early days. Maybe something giant smashed into Earth about 4.5 billion years ago, and this impact formed both the Moon and these blobs. Scientists believe it could have been a planet named Theia, a Mars-sized planet that existed somewhere around the asteroid belt and slammed into Earth back in the day. Others believe it could be something much more familiar, old chunks of Earth's crust. Perhaps they got pushed deep into the mantle by the movement of tectonic plates. And now, a new study shows that these blobs are massive piles of oceanic crust that have been sinking into the Earth for billions of years. They could have formed from the stuff that sinks into Earth when tectonic plates collide. Over 1 billion years, pieces of ocean crust could have been swallowed by the mantle. Eventually, they collected into two massive regions deep inside the planet. But even though both blobs form the same way, they aren't identical. There's this place called the Pacific Ring of Fire, a giant loop of volcanoes and earthquake zones around the Pacific Ocean. Well, the Pacific blob doesn't just stop growing and changing because it's constantly being fed fresh rock from that place. Tectonic plates crash into each other, and one plate sinks beneath another, pushing old ocean crust deep into the Earth. Since this keeps happening, the Pacific blob is heavier, denser, and more active than its twin under Africa. It's like a giant hot rock factory, constantly getting new material and reshaping itself over time. The African blob is much older and quieter than the one under the Pacific. It doesn't get fresh rock pushed into it as often. That's why, over time, it has blended more with the surrounding mantle. Since it's less dense, it behaves differently. It rises higher into the Earth's mantle, stretching 340 miles closer to the surface. And that might be why Africa has so many powerful volcanoes and rift valleys today. The biggest question is, how do they keep evolving? Scientists think that huge columns of hot rock, called mantle plumes, might be pushing up from deep inside the Earth, helping to drive the movement of tectonic plates in the Pacific. If they're right, then these giant underground blobs aren't just sitting there. They're almost alive in a way. They'd be constantly changing and shaping the surface of our planet. But why do they even matter? Because these weird underground structures may be shaping Earth's surface in ways we don't fully understand yet. You see, first, they might influence Earth's magnetic field. That's because they affect how heat moves through the mantle and core. They might also hold clues about the history of plate tectonics. Studying them could help us figure out when subduction began on Earth, whether it was over 4 billion years ago or much more recently. These guys might also be secret puppet masters behind volcanic activity. There's a theory that blazing hot rock from deep inside the Earth, the same kind that creates volcanic hotspots, might be rising straight from the giant blobs in the mantle. Some of the biggest volcanoes on Earth, including those in Hawaii, Iceland, and Yellowstone, sit directly above the suspected rising plumes from these blobs. If these blobs are fueling these volcanoes, then they could be responsible for shaping Earth's continents, climate, and even mass extinctions throughout history. And well, that's horrifying. That would mean that these giant structures might burst through Earth's crust one day, unleashing catastrophic supervolcanic eruptions, and these eruptions would last for millions of years. Beneath the Earth's surface also lies monsters unlike anything else on this planet – supervolcanoes. They're so massive, so destructive, and so rare that no human has ever witnessed one erupt. A regular volcanic eruption can be terrifying. Lava spewing into the sky, ash choking the air, entire cities buried under fire and stone. But a supervolcano? Well, that's something else entirely. A supervolcano isn't just big, it's a category of its own. Their eruptions rip apart the Earth itself, creating massive craters called calderas. Some of them are over 30 miles wide. A regular volcanic eruption might spew out a few cubic miles of lava and ash. A supervolcano unleashes more than 240 cubic miles of material. That's enough to bury an entire continent in ash. An eruption like this would be newsworthy, to say the least. First, a wall of fire would blow up into the sky. Ash would block out the sun for years, dropping global temperatures. Entire countries could be buried under meters of ash, making farming impossible. Famine, extreme cold, and toxic air could wipe out entire civilizations. It wouldn't just be a local disaster, it would be global. In fact, two of the worst mass extinctions in Earth's history, where almost all life was wiped out, might have been caused by supervolcanoes, not asteroids. The biggest and most horrifying one was at the end of the Permian period. Literally, about 90% of all marine species and 70% of land species went poof. Scientists have counted about 20 supervolcanoes on Earth today. The most famous ones are Yellowstone in the US, Toba in Indonesia, and Topao in New Zealand. Now, the last time Yellowstone erupted was roughly 2 million years ago. It released almost 590 cubic miles of material, enough to bury a city like New York. That was just one of 3 Yellowstone supereruptions. The most recent supervolcano to erupt was Topao in New Zealand. This happened about 26,500 years ago. But supervolcanoes don't just destroy, they reshape the entire planet. About 74,000 years ago, the Toba supervolcano erupted in Indonesia. Some scientists believe it triggered a volcanic winter that lasted an entire decade. There are also theories that suggest that this eruption nearly wiped out early humans. It reduced their numbers to just a few thousand survivors, although that's just speculation. Either way, we know for sure that supervolcano eruptions have changed the course of history. So, how do we prepare for them if this could happen at any moment? Well, scientists monitor volcanoes constantly, looking for warning signs. It could be stuff like rising magma, ground swelling, earthquakes beneath a volcano, changes in gas emissions, and so on. The problem is that while we can predict short-term eruptions, the long-term ones are still a mystery. Yellowstone last erupted 630,000 years ago. It's literally overdue for another eruption already. But volcanoes don't work like clocks. Just because one erupted in the past doesn't mean it will definitely go wild again, and the time between eruptions could be random. Scientists think Yellowstone could erupt again, but it might be just a small lava flow instead of a super eruption. Are we ready for a super eruption if it happens? Probably not. Scientists say we're more prepared for an asteroid strike than a supervolcano eruption. When Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai erupted in 2022, it cut off communications, caused tsunamis, and filled the sky with ash. And that was only a magnitude 5 eruption. A supervolcano would be orders of magnitude worse. So, good luck sleeping at night knowing these guys will erupt again. Maybe tomorrow, maybe in 100,000 years. Nah, don't lose sleep over it. Guess what? A huge ocean might be hidden deep beneath us, about 250 to 400 miles down, and it's bigger than any ocean on Earth's surface. Scientists were listening to earthquakes deep within our planet and noticed how these shakes slowed down when passing through certain parts of the mantle. This suggested that water was there. Models and experiments led them to uncover the underground ocean. But this ocean isn't like the typical water you imagine. It's a lot crazier. The mantle is a thick layer between the Earth's crust and core. It consists of the upper mantle, the lower mantle, and a mysterious layer between them called the transition zone. In the upper layer, we can often find a fascinating material called olivine, which got its name from a pretty greenish color. Olivine doesn't care about high temperatures and thrives in lava comfortably. It not only thrives, but it even makes up 50% of the entire upper mantle. We can find this stuff on Earth thanks to volcanoes. When volcanoes spew their magma out, all the minerals in it make their way to the surface. As magma cools and solidifies, it forms igneous rocks, and the minerals start to crystallize. Olivine is one of the first minerals to crystallize, and since there's so much of it in magma, it forms lots of crystals. Sometimes they're small, but sometimes they grow large and become very noticeable. We collect these large gemstones and use them to make pretty accessories and for other purposes, such as casting metals. But as we dive deeper within the Earth, about 250 miles down, things get strange for olivine. We enter the mysterious transition zone. The pressures get way higher, and the temperatures rise significantly. Here, olivine transforms into beautiful rock called wadsleyite and ringwoodite. Just like with olivine, we sometimes find them thanks to volcanic activity. Both are blue-green with a beautiful glassy appearance. Unfortunately, they're exceedingly rare and small, so you can't make accessories out of them. They're usually studied in labs. But they can do something that olivine can't. Thanks to their structure, they can act like a sponge, soaking up water. Now, this doesn't mean that they're literally wet. Rather, wadsleyite and ringwoodite can store water components, hydrogen and oxygen, within their structure. Usually, up to about 3% of them are water particles. These two little guys play an immense role in our planet's geology. They influence how the Earth's mantle conducts electricity as well as its viscosity, or how well it flows. This affects mantle convection, plate tectonics, and even volcanic activity. Without these tiny crystals, our planet would be completely different. The world could be mostly underwater, with just a few mountaintops visible. They also help us better understand how water works in general. So the transition zone is special because it's hydrated. Here we come to the recent discovery, a massive underground water reservoir. Scientists try to understand how water behaves in this deep part of the Earth. They discovered that as water-rich ringwoodite moves even deeper into the Earth to the lower mantle, it can start to melt a bit. This means it can release a bit of water and then trap it somewhere underground instead of letting it move around freely. But this released water wouldn't really be in its liquid, solid, or gas forms. Instead, it would be chemically bound to the underground structures. So, it won't be an ocean in the traditional sense, but there might be a vast amount of water down there. This finding is super important because it changes the way we understand Earth's water cycle and resources. It turns out that water isn't just found on the surface, but also moves through hidden spaces deep inside the planet. Another fascinating thing we discovered about water is that it might exist in a mysterious fourth state of matter. Now, we're used to thinking of water in its three common states: solid, liquid, and gas. But under extreme pressure in tiny spaces, it can enter a mysterious fourth state known as tunneling. We discovered this strange behavior in the mineral called beryl. Within beryl, there are super small six-sided channels, just about 5 atoms across. Turns out these channels act like tiny cages that can trap individual water molecules, like wadsleyite and ringwoodite. In these conditions, the water molecules start showing behaviors that are closer not to classical physics, but to quantum physics. Quantum tunneling allows particles to exist in multiple places at once or pass through barriers they shouldn't be able to. Imagine a ball that somehow ends up on the other side of a hill without climbing over it. It just goes through the hill. Hydrogen atoms in beryl are like tiny balls. Typically, each ball would sit in one specific spot. However, in the experiment, these hydrogen atoms didn't stay still. Instead, they were found simultaneously in multiple spots. Together, they formed a pattern that looked like 2 wavy rings. It's like water molecules got smeared around in a ring shape. This is a state of water that we've never seen before. It reshapes our understanding of how water behaves under certain conditions, and it has huge implications for biology. All these discoveries have everyone rethinking where Earth's water really comes from. Water is essential for life as we know it. About 71% of Earth is drenched in water, and humans are mostly water too. When we figure out how it appears in space and on planets, it would give us clues about how to better search for extraterrestrial life. One theory says that when Earth was forming, the materials that clumped together to make the planet already included water, or at least the ingredients to make it. Earth formed about 4.5 billion years ago. Our planet slowly emerged thanks to gravity from dust, gas, and rocks that surrounded our newborn sun. This material gradually came together to form the planets of our solar system. However, the young inner solar system was a scorching place, too hot for any liquid water to survive. It would have simply vaporized and escaped into space. But it's possible that water was trapped inside the rocks that initially formed Earth. Some of the Earth's original building blocks contain much more hydrogen than all our oceans combined. It would also explain how water molecules got so deep underground. Then, volcanic activity could have later released the water stored deep within, sending it into the atmosphere as vapor. This vapor would eventually cool down, condense, and fall as rain, filling the young Earth with lakes and seas. Another idea is that after Earth was formed, water was brought here by wet space visitors like comets and asteroids crashing into the planet. Long ago, the inner solar system was a wild and chaotic place, much like Brightside. When the outer planets rearranged their orbits, this caused a ripple effect, which we now call the Late Heavy Bombardment. It sent a flurry of icy space rocks crashing through the inner solar system, many of which collided with Earth. For a while, scientists thought that this event and comets were a primary source of Earth's water. But then, we learned that comets have a different chemical makeup from the water on Earth. Then we looked at the asteroids. Their water closely resembles the water in Earth's oceans. Some of the samples even contained organic materials. There's also a chance some random planet helped us out. About 4.5 billion years ago, a Mars-sized planet named Theia is thought to have collided with Earth. It was a violent encounter that melted part of Earth's mantle and led to the formation of the Moon. Perhaps Theia also brought some water with it. And finally, Earth could have generated its own water. Chemistry says that hydrogen could react with molten rock in vast magma oceans to produce seas and oceans. It's also possible that all these ideas are true, and Earth's water came from several sources. It complicates our research, but shows how dynamic water can be in space.
There are many miles of undiscovered areas beneath the crust we can't even come close to. Scientists found what appears to be underground mountains buried inside the mantle. Our planet is divided into 3 layers: the crust, the mantle, and the core. The crust is where 8 billion people, trillions of trees, and millions of animals live and thrive. There are also different types of crust in the land and the ocean. The oceanic crust contains unique rocks and is denser than the land crust. We all see how the Earth is divided and color-coded to show the crust, mantle, and core in textbooks. But there are also special layers in between that not everyone talks about. The mantle is divided into the upper and lower part, which is the transition zone. Since the mantle acts as the geological recycling center, the plate tectonics don't only move side to side, but up and down. It's actually why all the volcanoes appeared. The magma spews out to the surface or even underwater, and then sinks back down and repeats. The transitions go down 250 miles and then 410 miles. And in this bottom layer, scientists keep discovering the hidden landscapes. The mountains in the mantle are more rugged and much larger than the ones on the crust. Scientists found a mountain range with peaks higher than Mount Everest. Some of them are as high as 600 miles. When the continents were still landlocked together, there may have been some hidden lands now underwater. Theories suggest that Iceland used to be part of a larger microcontinent, Icelandia, which connected present-day Iceland with Greenland and Scandinavia. The idea digs even deeper to a greater Icelandia, which includes Britain. But after the split, these bigger lands sunk with everything in it. There are also theories about New Zealand being part of Zealandia, a hidden microcontinent within the same region. So it could be that these mountains used to be part of old Earth that are underground over the billions of years of natural occurrences. But still, it isn't very likely. One theory is that these underground mountain ranges could be leftover slabs of rock that descended from the surface to the transition zone from the moving of the tectonic plates. As they sink, the large pieces break down into smaller ones, and as they compile over the millions of years, they form what appears to be underground mountains. Since the mantle is the geologic recycling zone, it's likely that the rocks down there used to be part of the surface. They weren't large pieces of land that got hidden, just like dogs hide bones in the garden, but it takes way more time to hide mountains. Some parts of the mantle appear to be smooth, while others aren't so much. The parts that have a cluster of rocks could contain hidden elements in the underground mountains. The smoother parts don't have much seismic or volcanic activity, while the rough parts do. The best way to study those underground landscapes is to wait for an earthquake or a volcano eruption to happen. Seismologists can observe the Earth's interior with special scanners, just like doctors use ultrasound to examine a patient. They can even see minor details and not huge chunks of rocks. A strong enough earthquake can send shock waves to the Earth's interior, even through the core and back up to the surface. Depending on where they occur, seismologists can observe and study the intensity of the waves as they move back and forth. On smooth rocks, the waves can travel in a straight line, but once they reach a rough area, the waves tend to scatter. The temperature and composition of the materials can make the waves move faster or slower. But this info isn't exactly accurate and won't contribute a lot to the actual data of the underground mountains. So by analyzing the scattered waves on ships and utilizing the Earth's magnetic field, scientists can figure out everything they need to know. But these studies are only good enough to figure out the interior in today's state, not how the Earth changed over the past 4.5 billion years. However, scientists are certain that mantle material still dates back to the beginning of Earth's original formation. The question, Why not just dig a hole to the center of the Earth and see what's going on down there? Might seem logical. The deepest hole humans have dug so far is the Kola Deep borehole in the Russian Arctic that goes more than 40,000 feet deep. The locals claim they can actually hear screaming coming from below. It took almost 20 years to drill as far as they went, but it's literally merely scratching the surface of what's underneath. They dug about 1/3 of the crust, which is only 0.2% to the center of the Earth. Getting there is beyond us, just like trying to reach the sun. No human can handle the amount of pressure down there. Going down the Mariana Trench, the Earth's deepest point, requires special gear to withstand all the immense pressure. It'll cost a fortune to build that tech to get us to the center of our planet. Evidence of diamonds buried deep in Brazil shows that everything we do on the crust's surface can affect things miles below, even towards the mantle. Scientists dug up 6 diamonds that could hold tiny mineral grains. As they're called in the mineral world, these inclusions have a chemistry composition where they originated deep in the Earth. Typical diamonds are formed at depths less than 125 miles in the upper mantle, where it's extremely hot. The high pressure and boiling temperature down crystallizes carbon and creates diamonds. But humans can't dig all the way down there. They mine them by detecting where a deep volcanic eruption happened that expelled these diamonds to the surface. These eruptions occurred millions of years ago, when dinosaurs used to rule the Earth. They shot out the diamonds that were in the mantle and are now embedded within the cooled down volcanic material. That's where people mine them. But these special diamonds found in Brazil originated from a much deeper point than usual, which can further help scientists study the depths of the Earth. They can extract these inclusions and analyze them in a lab to tell where exactly these minerals come from. In the lab, scientists study inclusions, each just 15 to 40 microns wide, less than a quarter width of a human hair. They found out that they contained many types of minerals found in volcanic rock on the surface. The carbon composition of the magma from the surface is much different than the ones deep in the Earth. What's crazy is that these diamonds with special inclusions can only be found 435 miles in the lower mantle. With only a few samples of them found, we don't know what else lies beneath us. It's possible that those mountain ranges underground, taller than Mount Everest, can have traces of diamonds all around, which would prompt excavators to dig them up and saturate the market with them. These diamonds are less flawed than the usual ones and might even come in many sizes. It's possible to see diamonds as large as a car or as small as a grain of rice. There might even be new diamonds with different chemical compositions than the ones we find near the surface. The largest diamond in the world is the Cullinan, which can fit in the palm of your hand. It weighs around 1.3 pounds and is 3,100 carats. It was found in 1905 in South Africa. For anything to exist on Earth, you need carbon. In a nutshell, the carbon cycle is when plants and algae release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere or dissolved in water through photosynthesis. It's converted into carbohydrates and stored as fat. Later on, carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere through breathing, which the plants benefit from, and the cycle goes on. Scientists claim that there might even be a carbon cycle in Earth's interior. The oceanic crust has a lot of carbon sediment that could mix with the upper and lower mantle layer. But there still isn't enough evidence to support this. The deep diamonds might be the key to popping open that theory. Only time will tell.
Over 50 ships and 20 planes have vanished without a trace in this area. The Bermuda Triangle still sends chills down people's spines, and now it's given us another mystery. What could happen next? Scientists have discovered a strange new mystery under the North Atlantic, right beneath the Bermuda Archipelago. It's an infamous region. You must have heard about the Bermuda Triangle, right? It's a huge area in the North Atlantic, roughly between Florida, Bermuda, and the Greater Antilles, roughly forming a massive triangle. Experts haven't agreed on its exact boundaries yet, but it covers hundreds of thousands of square miles. You must have heard creepy stories about ships and planes disappearing in the triangle. We'll talk about it a bit later. Right now, another mystery is looming on the horizon. Below the island of Bermuda, researchers have found an enormous rock layer about 12.5 miles thick, and it's way thicker than anything like this anywhere else in the world. Now, normally the ocean floor has a crust at the bottom, and below that is the mantle. But under Bermuda, there's an extra layer right beneath the crust, inside the tectonic plate the island sits on. It's a totally unexpected structure, and scientists aren't sure how it could form. This discovery might explain a long-standing mystery about Bermuda itself. The island is located on an oceanic swell. That's a part of the ocean floor that's higher than its surroundings. Now, usually a swell like this comes from volcanoes, but there's no evidence of any ongoing volcanic activity there. Bermuda's last known eruption occurred 31 million years ago. That's why the discovery of this new rock layer is so important. It may be the clue to a baffling mystery. Researchers think the last eruption might have pushed mantle rock up into the crust. This rock then froze in place, forming a kind of raft that lifted the ocean floor by about 1,600 feet. And this giant frozen structure may be what keeps the Bermuda archipelago on an oceanic swell, high above the surrounding ocean floor. You see, some island chains form because of hot spots deep under the earth. Hot rock rises from the mantle, melts, and creates volcanoes. When this happens, the ocean floor gets pushed up. But after that, as tectonic plates shift, islands slowly drift away from the hot mantle plume that created them. They cool down, sink under their own weight, and leave a trail of old volcanoes behind. Over millions of years, many of these once tall islands sink below the ocean. Some become underwater mountains. Those are called seamounts. And if erosion flattens their tops near the surface, they're called guyots. A perfect example is the Hawaiian Emperor chain. Hawaii's Big Island is still active and above water, but as you go northwest, the islands get older, smaller, and eventually sink below the ocean. Bermuda is different. Its swell hasn't gone down, even though it hasn't had a volcanic eruption in millions of years. To figure out this mystery, scientists used a seismic station on Bermuda. They looked at how waves from big earthquakes around the world traveled under the island at a depth of about 31 miles. They noted where the waves changed speed, and it helped them find a huge thick layer of rock under Bermuda. Interestingly, this rock is less dense than the surrounding material, acting like a raft, keeping the ocean floor lifted and explaining the island's swell. Research shows that the lava from Bermuda is low in silica, which means it came from a rock that is high in carbon. And the analysis of zinc in rock samples suggests that this carbon came from deep in the mantle. It was likely pushed there when the supercontinent Pangaea formed between 900 million and 300 million years ago. This is different from islands formed over hotspots in the Pacific or Indian Oceans. One of the reasons may be that the Atlantic is a younger ocean, created when Pangaea split, while the Pacific and Indian Oceans are older. And Bermuda's location, once at the heart of Pangaea, may help explain why it is so unique. Scientists are now studying other islands to see if similar rock layers exist, or if Bermuda is truly one of a kind. Understanding extreme locations like Bermuda helps scientists figure out the normal and unusual processes that shape our planet. Now, the Bermuda Triangle itself has fascinated and frightened people for over a century. Officially, the Bermuda Triangle doesn't even exist. No world map marks it, and the U.S. Board on Geographic Names doesn't recognize it as a real region. But people still know about this location and fear it. Stories of unexplained disappearances in the area date back to the mid-19th century, but the phrase Bermuda Triangle didn't appear until 1964, when the region was described as a triangular stretch of ocean that had destroyed hundreds of ships and planes without a trace. In 1918, the USS Cyclops vanished without explanation while traveling from Brazil to Baltimore, taking 306 crew members with it. Decades later, in 1945, Flight 19 disappeared over the same waters, leaving no wreckage and no clues. American writer Charles Berlitz added fuel to the mystery in his 1974 bestseller, The Bermuda Triangle. He even linked the disappearances to the mythical lost city of Atlantis. But despite the stories, the Bermuda Triangle isn't unusually dangerous. Studies, including one by the World Wildlife Fund in 2013, show that it's not even among the world's 10 most hazardous shipping areas. The region sees heavy daily traffic by both sea and air, which makes it one of the busiest shipping lanes on the planet. So, why all the mystery? The Bermuda Triangle gets hit by tropical storms and hurricanes all the time. The Gulf Stream, a powerful ocean current, dashes through the area and causes sudden and extreme weather changes. Compass readings can get tricky here too. The Agonic Line, where true north and magnetic north align, sometimes passes through the triangle. And below it all lies the Atlantic's deepest point, the Milwaukee Depth. It plunges 27,500 feet into the Puerto Rico Trench. These factors combined can lead to accidents that will make anyone believe there's something mysterious going on in the region. No wonder people have always been wondering about what's going on there. A few theories emerged. Let's take a look at the most plausible ones. So one thing to consider is rogue waves. These are super big, sudden waves that pop up out of nowhere. They're at least twice as tall as the waves around them, like walls of water. They're really dangerous for ships and anything in the ocean. Add all those severe storms and powerful currents in the triangle, and you'll understand that a ship could get smashed in seconds in such conditions. Some scientists talk about methane bubbles coming up from the ocean floor. According to them, if enough of that gas hits the water at once, it actually makes the water less dense, and this can actually cause a ship to sink. Sure, this phenomenon doesn't happen all the time, but it's enough to make people nervous. Then there's the magnetic stuff. Back in the day, compasses would freak out in the Bermuda Triangle because true north and magnetic north sometimes line up here. So sailors get totally lost. GPS fixes that these days, but in the past, it caused serious headaches and led to rumors and urban legends. Plus, as we already know, the weather is severe in that area. Hurricanes, tropical storms, and the Gulf Stream can turn calm waters into a total nightmare in no time. But a lot of it is just human error, too. The Triangle is one of the busiest shipping routes on the planet. Pilots and captains can mess up, especially in bad weather or at night. Flight 19 is a classic example. Once we mix heavy traffic with all those natural hazards, accidents are just going to happen. So even though the Bermuda Triangle is kind of scary, mostly it's just nature doing its thing. And we just need to deal with it. We still have a lot to explore and discover in that region, and we need to learn to navigate that area.
It started as a routine cleaning to scoop some mud off the coast of Indonesia, but turned into a discovery of remnants of a lost, submerged, Ice Age landmass. Archaeologists found more than 6,000 fossil fragments, and among them, 140,000-year-old Homo erectus remains. This find made scientists rethink how early humans lived, moved, and interacted in Southeast Asia. For years, they thought that Homo erectus on Java Island lived in isolation, separated from the rest of the world. But these dredged fossils blew that story apart. It turns out Java wasn't an island at all back then, but part of a landmass called Sundaland. So, Southeast Asia stretched out like someone had drained the ocean, connecting Indonesia, Malaysia, Borneo, Thailand, and Vietnam into one gigantic landscape. Today's islands of Java, Sumatra, Borneo, and Bali were connected by river systems that probably looked like the Amazon, by forests where giant animals roamed, and by coastal plains that would later sink beneath the ocean when temperatures went up. And Homo erectus were not stuck. They were thriving in what honestly sounds like prehistoric bliss. Yep, it was nothing like we normally imagine Ice Age, a sort of frozen wasteland. Sea levels dropped more than 400 feet because so much water froze into glaciers. When all that water got locked up in ice, whole sections of the ocean floor popped out of the water like stepping stones. Suddenly, early humans didn't need boats. They could literally walk from what's now mainland Southeast Asia all the way to places that are islands today. They could do it while exploring and chasing herds across open land. It was sort of like a giant prehistoric highway system. That giant highway matters because it completely rewrites how early humans moved around. Instead of being trapped, Homo erectus had a whole continent to roam. They followed rivers, crossed valleys, and adapted to different environments the same way you learn shortcuts to the office or find new routes to your favorite coffee shop. And because everything was connected, animals wandered freely too. Tigers, elephants, supersized cows, and turtles the size of small cars. People followed these big animals. This among the fossils pulled from the Madura Strait, such as cut-marked turtle shells and cracked open bovid bones. When you see precise cut marks on bone, it means someone was deliberately carving meat off the bone with tools they made themselves. And cracked bones mean they were taking out marrow, which was like prehistoric energy gel, rich, fatty, and perfect when you need calories to survive. That's a level of planning and skill scientists didn't expect from Homo erectus. It pushes Homo erectus closer to species like early Homo sapiens and Denisovans when it comes to behavior. It means they weren't just surviving on scraps, they were actively pursuing animals, processing, and maybe even sharing food the same way later humans did. So if you imagine them as slow, hunched cavemen, forget that. These people were sharp. The techniques they used to process food look eerily similar to those used by other hominins. Not just Homo erectus, we're talking Homo floresiensis, Denisovans, and early Homo sapiens. That opens the door to the possibility that these groups didn't just exist side by side. They might have interacted. Maybe they traded ideas and copied techniques. Or maybe they even interbred or shared territories. All this makes Southeast Asia look not like a series of isolated islands, but like a buzzing human ecosystem, a place where different human species crossed paths. And here's the heartbreaking part. Everything we know about this place, everything humans built, lost, and discovered there, is all underwater now. When the Ice Age ended, glaciers melted like forgotten ice cream cones on a hot sidewalk. Sea levels rose. Slowly, then quickly, rivers flooded, coastlines vanished, entire human landscapes disappeared beneath the waves. Sundaland drowned over thousands of years, and the people who lived there either adapted or moved to higher ground. Archaeologists now try to interpret what these people did, how they lived, and how many human species walked that land. Every time they pull together bone or artifact from the seabed, we get one step closer to rewriting everything we thought we knew about early human migration. And the new discovery could mean that Southeast Asia may have been just as important to human evolution as Africa, the Middle East, or Europe. Looks like Sundaland wasn't a side quest, but a real mixing zone, a place where humanity experimented, adapted, learned, and evolved. Unexpected finds like this one in Indonesia keep popping up around the world and surprising scientists. Farmers in China were hoping to scoop up bat droppings for natural fertilizers inside a narrow limestone cave. But instead, they spotted pieces of fossilized bone that looked suspiciously like parts of a human skull. This skull turned out to be ridiculously old, around 300,000 years old. Scientists eventually named the fossil Maba 1. The discovery happened way back in 1958, but ever since then, nobody could agree on which ancient human species this skull belonged to. During the late Middle Pleistocene, the world was basically a crowded highway of different ancient human species wandering around. Or just maybe, Maba 1 came from a species we've never met before. The big issue was that researchers only found part of the skull, no jaw, no other bones. So it was like trying to solve a giant puzzle with half the pieces missing. For ages, scientists guessed it might be Neanderthal. But now they've used micro-CT scanning, which is like an X-ray superpower that lets you peek inside fossils without breaking them. That's when they noticed weird tube-like structures connecting parts of the brain case, something Neanderthals basically never had. The inside shape of the skull looked way more like Homo erectus, a much older human species. But even that wasn't a perfect match. The skull's size and shape were closer to modern humans and Neanderthals, and it showed traits Homo erectus usually didn't have. For example, it had a shorter forehead area and a thickened bregma, the meeting point between two skull bones. Maba 1 also had a strange dent on the forehead, almost like a bruise frozen in time. Whatever caused it, maybe a fall, maybe anemia, it happened while the person was alive, but there was no sign of infection, so that individual probably healed and kept living after whatever hit them. So Maba 1 doesn't match any known species perfectly, but it shares features with several and has a similar mystery fossil vibe as others found across Africa. In 1976, a famous paleontologist and her team found another human-like skull in Tanzania. That skull had features that looked surprisingly similar to Homo sapiens, even though it was unbelievably old. Scientists think it may be one of the earliest examples of our species ever discovered. That means this skull could help solve one of science's biggest questions. When exactly did Homo sapiens first show up? The sediment layer where that skull was found goes all the way back to the Middle Pleistocene. That's way earlier than what old textbooks used to claim about when modern humans appeared. And then there's the skull that turned up in Zambia's Broken Hill ore mine. Miners literally stumbled on it, plus a few other bones, completely by accident. Scientists started calling it Rhodesian Man, and at first, everyone thought it might be the big missing link between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. But with newer research tools and better dating methods, they discovered it's around 299,000 years old and probably belonged to someone from the species Homo heidelbergensis. Every new fossil acts like a missing puzzle piece on the giant chaotic story of human evolution. Each one helps scientists connect species that once seemed unrelated, redraw family trees, and rewrite chapters of our past we didn't even know were wrong. A vast expanse of white snow, freezing winds, lifeless landscapes, and weird, eerie signals seemingly coming from within Earth. These radio pulses occur in Antarctica, and no one can figure out what they are and where they're coming from. You see, scientists are running an experiment called ANITA, short for Antarctica Impulsive Transient Antenna. Basically, it's a bunch of detectors strapped to giant balloons and floating way up above the South Pole. Their job is to detect extremely high-energy neutrinos. How do they spot them? Right at the moment when neutrinos come into contact with ice and produce an intense, short burst of radio waves. Now, neutrinos are these tiny, almost massless particles that don't have an electric charge. They're everywhere, and billions of them are flying through you every second, even while you're watching this video. Neutrinos come from all over the place, from the sun, exploding stars, deep space, even from under your feet. The sun pumps them out non-stop as it fuses hydrogen into helium. Stars that are going off blast out huge bursts of neutrinos during supernova explosions. When high-energy cosmic rays hit our atmosphere, they make new neutrinos that rain down on us too. And some even come from radioactive stuff decaying inside Earth. The oldest neutrinos have been flying through the universe since the Big Bang, but they're practically invisible because they almost never react with anything. That's why scientists use unbelievable experiments like ANITA to try and catch even a few of them. But let's get back to that fateful day when everything changed. Normally, the radio signals produced by neutrinos bounce off the ice and fly upward. That's where ANITA can catch them. This is the whole point of the experiment, to study neutrinos and learn more about distant cosmic events like supernovas or whatever's happening light years away. But then something really weird happened. The detectors picked up radio waves that weren't bouncing off the ice at all. They looked like they were coming from below the horizon, from under the ice. Now, this shouldn't even be possible. According to everything we know about physics, signals can't just travel upward through solid rock and ice. One of the researchers, Stephanie Wiesel from Penn State, also said that those radio waves were coming in at super steep angles, like 30 degrees below the surface. The only way that could happen is if the signal had passed through thousands of miles of solid rock before hitting the detector. But if that were true, the rock would have completely absorbed it. So something just didn't add up. The team ran all the numbers and still got no clear answer. But for them, it was an interesting problem, since they didn't actually know what those anomalies were. What they did know was that they were probably not neutrinos.
That's because if the team does detect a neutrino, that means it's traveled an insane distance without bumping into anything, possibly all the way from the edge of the observable universe. So, whatever Anita has picked up, it's not behaving like anything scientists have seen before. It might mean there's some totally new type of particle out there, or maybe something else is going on that we just don't understand yet. They published the findings in physical review letters, but the mystery remains unsolved. No one really knows what's going on under that Antarctic ice, just that something out there isn't playing by the rules. Now, if scientists actually manage to detect and trace where those crazy fast particles come from, they can learn tons of stuff about the universe. Way more than even the biggest, most expensive telescopes allow us to see. You see, neutrinos basically zip through space almost at the speed of light, barely bumping into anything. It means they can carry untouched data about events that happened millions or even billions of light years away. That's why Whistle and a bunch of other researchers around the world have been building these insanely sensitive detectors to catch neutrino signals. Even the tiniest ones are super important, because in this field, one tiny blip of data can hold a treasure chest of information. So, researchers have been designing setups in both Antarctica and South America to catch these rare particles. Anita is one of those detectors, and Antarctica's the perfect spot for it. There's hardly any radio noise, there are no cities, no traffic, and no random interference. The setup is actually pretty cool. They attach a cluster of radio antennas to a giant balloon, send it a few dozen miles up into the sky, and make it float over the endless stretches of white ice. From up there, it points downward, listening for faint radio signals coming from deep inside the ice. When one of those super rare neutrinos, specifically a tau neutrino, hits the ice, it creates another particle called a tau lepton. That lepton then shoots out of the ice and starts breaking down, losing energy and turning into smaller bits. That decay process gives off what's called an air shower, kind of like a spray of invisible sparks flying through the air. If we could actually see those air showers with our eyes, they'd look like someone waving a sparkler through the dark, bright streaks trailing behind as it moves. Studying the direction and pattern of these signals, the ones from the ice showers, and the ones in the air showers, scientists can figure out where the original particle came from. Usually it's super precise, kind of like bouncing a ball off the ground. You can predict where it'll go. But these weird new signals don't bounce the way they're supposed to. The angles are all wrong way steeper than anything the models can explain. So the team dug deeper. First, they looked at all the data from Anita's multiple balloon flights. Then they compared it against tons of computer simulations of cosmic rays and neutrinos and filtered out all the usual background noise. They even cross-checked their results with other experiments like the ice cube detector, which is also located in Antarctica, and the Pierre Auger Observatory in Argentina. They wanted to see if anyone else had picked up similar upward-going air showers. And guess what? Things got even weirder. They found nothing. No other detectors had picked up anything that could explain what Anita had seen. That's why the researchers ended up calling the whole situation anomalous. It basically means, yeah, we have no idea what this is, but it sure isn't behaving like a neutrino. Whistle explained that the signals just didn't fit into the usual picture of how particles were supposed to act. Some people have floated ideas, like maybe it's some new kind of physics, or a hint of dark matter. Dark matter is basically that invisible stuff that keeps the universe from falling apart. It's everywhere. We just can't see it. Scientists have been trying to figure out what it actually is for almost a century, and it's still one of the biggest mysteries out there. Everything we can see, like stars, planets, people, dogs, makes up only about 5% of the universe, and dark matter makes up around 27%. The rest is something even stranger called dark energy. Scientists think dark matter is what gives galaxies their shape and holds everything together like cosmic glue. Without it, the universe would look totally different. It would be totally amazing to find out that this theory is true. But since IceCube and Auger haven't caught the same thing, that really limits the possibilities. Penn State has been in the neutrino detecting game for almost a decade now, building detectors and analyzing all kinds of cosmic signals. And the team is already working on their next big project, a brand new detector called Puel. It's going to be bigger, more sensitive, and way better at spotting those elusive neutrino signals. For now, this remains just one of those long-running cosmic mysteries that keep scientists awake at night. But the team is optimistic. When Pueo goes up, it'll have better sensors, which means if there really are more of these anomalies out there, this time they'll catch them. And maybe then we'll finally figure out what's behind them.
Clouds of blazing ash obscure the sun. The ground is shaking. People are running in different directions. A volcanic eruption has begun. And it started suddenly. A small, sunny coastal town is facing one of the most devastating natural disasters. The ash will settle. Lava will spill out of the volcano's mouth. And within a few hours, the ancient city of Pompeii will be in... Wait a minute. People get into cars and drive away. This is not Pompeii. This is a modern town. Huh? Is it possible for a city to get buried during an eruption today? Unfortunately, yes. Welcome to Montserrat, which is also called the Pompeii of the Caribbean. Montserrat is not a city. This is the British Overseas Territory in the Lesser Antilles, one of the Caribbean islands. It has the Soufriere Hills volcano that turned the lives of many residents of the capital, Plymouth, into a nightmare in 1995. But what kind of place is this, and why do people live here at all? The Montserrat area is not very big. It's about 6 times smaller than the Chicago area, and there aren't many people living here. Before 1995, the population of Montserrat was about 15,000 inhabitants. It's not a lot, but the island gathered several different cultures, as it was inhabited by the Irish, Africans, and indigenous people. Montserrat is one of the youngest volcanic islands of the Lesser Antilles. Before 1995, the Soufriere Hills volcano erupted here in the 17th century. Many years had passed since then, so people were not very worried about its new awakening. They rested, worked, had fun, went boating to other islands. And all this continued for about 300 years. Then, the serene paradise life ended. In 1995, seismic activity began. It continued for several months and led to an explosive eruption in 1996. Fortunately, no one got hurt, but the real disaster hit in June 1997. Something bad started happening at the top of the Soufriere Hills. At an altitude of about 3,000 feet, the volcano began spitting out ash clouds, rocks, and hot gas, releasing its boiling innards, which were rapidly falling down the steep slope. The locals were terrified. Some people had evacuated from the island by that time. They had to leave their homes and sail away, but some locals stayed and didn't survive. The pyroclastic flow destroyed many buildings, streets, and roads. In case you didn't know, the pyroclastic flow is a dense, thick mix of volcanic ash, lava, and hot gases that moves as an incandescent mass at high speed. It burns and destroys everything in its path. On that day, the pyroclastic flow was moving at 62 miles per hour, with its temperature reaching around 1470 degrees Fahrenheit. Imagine boiling water. Pretty hot, isn't it? And the temperature of that pyroclastic flow was almost 7 times higher. One part of the inhabitants of the island moved to its northern part, and the other migrated to the neighboring islands. Since then, Plymouth has become a ghost town. Thanks to the solidified magma, you can see buildings that seem to have particularly sunk through the ground or stuck in textures. The streets are deserted, and the roads are covered with a thick layer of volcanic mass. After the eruption, only 1,000 people stayed on the island. There are about 4,500 people living there now, all of them in the northern, safe part. The southern side of the island is now called the Exclusion Zone. It's divided into 5 parts: A, B, C, F, and V, the most dangerous area. Why is it dangerous? Because the volcano is still active. Periodically, it spits out clouds of ash. It can erupt with devastating force at any moment, but that doesn't stop thrill seekers. Montserrat attracts many tourists who like to walk in the picturesque areas near the active volcano. People also love the ghost town. The roofs of houses, spires, and the remains of the clock tower stick out of the solidified lava. Broken windows with torn curtains and dilapidated former hotels attract many tourists. You can enjoy the beautiful tropical northern part of the island and see the apocalyptic picture in its southern part. Locals actively promote tourism and advertise their home as the Pompeii of the Caribbean. Would you like to visit this place? Living next to a volcano is quite risky, but how about living inside a volcano? Near 220 miles south of Tokyo, there's a beautiful island of Aogashima, most of which is occupied by an active volcano. But how can people live inside a volcano and not be afraid? The answer is simple. This place is too beautiful. Besides, the last major eruption occurred there at the end of the 18th century. People don't live right inside the crater, that would be too much. A small settlement is located inside the outer wall of the crater, far from the geothermal activity and quite far from the dangerous peak. But it's still a pretty extreme place to call home. The population of the island is about 170 people, and they're not going to leave. Here you can find only one shop, one post office, free camping, and a couple of guest houses and 3 bars. It sounds pretty cozy considering that all this is located in a green paradise. But in 1785, this paradise resembled Pompeii during the infamous catastrophe. According to stories and remaining records, the first tremors occurred on May 18 or so. It was a warning of the impending disaster. At that time, 327 residents lived in Aogashima. It's not known whether they attached importance to the small earthquake, but they continued to live peacefully for another couple of weeks. The volcano's activity increased. The disaster was inevitable, so evacuation from the island began on June 4. Unfortunately, it was too late. There were earthquakes, terrible roars, and streams of hot lava that covered trees, roads, and houses. Many didn't survive that day. And still, the descendants of those who escaped from the island that day now reside in Aogashima. Aren't they afraid of another eruption? They look at this situation differently. Nothing can stop nature, so there's no point in resisting. And if there's no eruption, then it's better to enjoy the picturesque views and the relaxed rhythm of the island. Few people live there, and there's almost no urban entertainment. But still, you can find what to do. In the afternoon, you can walk along the green mountain range and enjoy the view of the Philippine Sea. You will feel one with nature, beautiful birds, the warm sun, and the physical exertion of the trip. It will all charge you with energy and inspiration. You can also go fishing, camping, or chat with the locals. At night, you can look at the stars. The night sky is perfect in Aogashima. Away from city lights, there's a low level of light pollution. A detailed star map can help you study celestial bodies without a telescope. Since the place is essentially an active volcano, you can find many geothermal springs there. One of the coolest and most popular places to visit is Aogashima Furiai. It's a sauna that uses volcanic energy to maintain high temperatures in the steam rooms. And outside the rooms, you can also find hot air vents for cooking. How about an omelet fried in volcanic heat? Sounds appealing. Of course, it's quite difficult to get to this place since Aogashima is a very remote island. You first need to get to the nearest larger island, Hachichojima. There are regular flights to it directly from Tokyo. You can also choose a more romantic trip and take an overnight ferry. It's only 2.5 hours by boat between Hachichojima and Aogashima. But if you've spent enough money, you can pay for a helicopter trip and spend a mere 20 minutes to get there. It wouldn't be surprising if you wanted to stay on the island forever after visiting it for the first time. A measured life in nature or the bustle of the concrete jungle? Which one would you choose? But don't forget that at any moment you can feel the ground tremble. But let's hope there won't be any eruptions soon.
Well, this eerie Lake Huron discovery may be that it possibly contains the remnants of an entire civilization. Whoa, wait, sounds like Atlantis, right? Well, not exactly. But if there really had been an ancient underwater civilization here, it must have been a pretty advanced one. Around 10,000 years ago, 2 sharp glassy flakes broke off a stone tool and landed on the ground unnoticed. They stayed buried there for thousands of years, until 2013. Then scientists pulled up a small chunk of mud, about the size of a milk carton, from the bottom of Lake Huron, 100 feet underwater. Inside the mud, they found those same 2 flakes made of obsidian, a shiny black volcanic glass that forms when lava cools quickly. After careful testing, they realized these flakes came from Central Oregon, which is quite a distance, about 2,500 miles away. They found this prehistoric Great Lakes site on the Alpena Amberley Ridge, an underwater landform that once connected what's now Michigan and Ontario. Back then, it was dry land. Early humans used it to build traps for animals like caribou as the Ice Age faded and the Great Lakes began to form. Now, obsidian was the high-tech material of ancient times. It's super sharp and perfect for making tools. If you study the flakes carefully, it's obvious that humans made them. You can see where they struck them and the feathered edges that come from being carefully chipped. That means people were not only crafting tools here, but they also had access to obsidian that came from incredibly far away. It was likely possible through a huge trade network that spanned across the continent. For over 100 years, people have guessed that ancient societies might have existed beneath the Great Lakes, but no one had proof. That's why work on this submerged archaeological site is so important. A team of researchers has been trying to learn more about the 10,000-year-old ruins and the civilization that left them behind for over a decade now. Lake Huron's icy water acted like a time capsule that helped preserve things for thousands of years. So far, researchers have found not only unique stone tools, but also ancient trees with roots still intact and underwater peat bogs that preserved seeds and leaves. It was like an Ice Age version of Pompeii, a scene frozen in time. These discoveries are also helping scientists create new technologies and ways to do underwater archaeology. They've engaged sonars, underwater robots, and divers so far. Now, it's pretty cool that the tools they found on the Alpena Amberley Ridge were way smaller than other tools from the same era found nearby. That might mean a different group of people lived here, and they had their own unique way of life. Even the peat bogs they found, which are about 9,500 years old, hold secrets. They're full of pine needles, seeds, and leaves that could reveal what the environment was like back then. Usually stuff like this breaks down quickly on land, but the cold freshwater preserved it. The Michigan team is working with scientists in Cambridge, England, to extract DNA from the remains. If it works, it could finally confirm what animals lived there, and maybe even more. There are still years of discovery on this prehistoric Great Lakes site ahead. Another famous submerged archaeological site is the lost city of Pavlo Petri. Archaeologists think it is the oldest sunken city in the world they've found and made official so far. Pavlo Petri is around 5,000 years old. That means it existed even before the legendary Greek heroes in Homer's stories. Scientists first spotted it way back in 1904, and then mostly forgot about it until 1967, when Nicholas Fleming rediscovered it. He described it as a Bronze Age city now lying under about 10 to 13 feet of water. A year later, he returned with a team of scientists to study the ruins. Over 6 weeks, using just hand tapes and a basic grid, they managed to map out the city. They found that it covered almost 1,000 feet by 500 feet and had at least 15 buildings, courtyards, 5 streets, 2 tombs, and around 37 small stone graves. They also found signs that the ruins continued onto the nearby island of Pavlo Petri itself. They dug up some amazing pottery, obsidian, and chert blades, and even a tiny bronze figurine that may date all the way back to 2800 BCE. Most of the buildings, though, came from the period between 1650 and 1180 BCE. Then scientists left the site alone again until 2009, when a super team of researchers launched a new 5-year project to really dive deep into the history of Pavlo Petri. This time, they had digital mapping tools and better diving equipment, so they could explore and even excavate underwater. They found another 97,000 square feet of buildings, including a large hall and hidden streets. Plus, they dug up even more pottery that showed people had been living in the city from about 3000 BCE to 1100 BCE, and that the city once had a population of 500 to 2,000 people. No one knows for sure how the city ended up underwater, but many scientists think it was because of an earthquake, maybe around 1000 BCE, or even as late as 375 CE. Because it's the oldest underwater city ever found, some people even believe Pavlo Petri might have inspired the legend of Atlantis. Another contestant for the Atlantis title lies near Japan. Back in 1986, a local diver was exploring the waters near the Ryukyu Islands when he found a giant structure made of perfectly shaped steps and sharp edges. It was 82 feet underwater. Today, the Yanaguni Monument is one of the most mysterious underwater sites on the planet. The structure is nearly half a football field in size. It looks like a massive stone pyramid with layers of platforms and steps stacked one on top of another. No one really knows where it came from or who built it. Some experts think the monument might be more than 10,000 years old, which would make it older than the Egyptian pyramids. One theory is that it could be the last remains of a lost civilization called Mu, a mythical Pacific society kind of like Atlantis. Others believe an ancient culture that lived in Japan as early as 12,000 BCE might have built it. But many scientists and geologists are skeptical about this possible underwater ancient civilization, even though Yanaguni has narrow passageways, arched openings, and right angles that almost look like city blocks. They say that the site looks a lot like natural rock formations, like the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, for example. The whole monument is still connected to a bigger chunk of bedrock, which means it wasn't built piece by piece. And the way the layers of rock are stacked probably has more to do with earthquakes and tectonic movement. It's located in the very active Pacific Ring of Fire. One marine geologist kept going back down there, and every time he found something new. He says he spotted tool marks in the rock, symbols carved into stone faces, and even rock formations shaped like animals. He believes these carvings point to a culture that came from mainland Asia. He said he had identified 10 different structures off Yanaguni, including a ruined castle, a triumphal arch, 5 temples, and even a huge museum. These buildings seem to be connected by roads and channels, and some parts are surrounded by what could be giant stone walls. The explorer believes the city is at least 5,000 years old, based on stalactites found in underwater caves nearby, which would have only formed after the caves flooded. His supporters say they have never seen an earthquake create shapes like this, above or below water. But skeptics blame it all on erosion and insist that whirling underwater currents and sea creatures left holes in the rock. Now, if you want to form your own opinion about it, the spot is open for visitors, and it's definitely a super fun diving experience.
The floor is lava. Haha, just kidding. But honestly, it's kind of falling apart. You might not feel it yet, but a huge part of North America has already lost 37 miles worth of rock from its foundation. And no, this isn't about earthquakes or giant sinkholes. It's about the continent losing pieces of the very thing that keeps the ground from wobbling around like a bad carnival ride. A team of researchers has just dropped a geological bombshell. Part of North America's ground is thinning out like a very sad, very slow ice cream drip. How do they know? They basically gave Earth a high-tech full-body MRI and created 3D maps showing how rocks once considered indestructible are now melting away into the planet's guts, like an upside-down cheese pizza inside an oven. But to really understand this mess, you first have to meet my old friends, cratons. Cratons are like the roots of the continents. They're thick, tough, and ancient. We're talking billions of years old. These bad boys survived meteor impacts, supervolcanoes, and even the tectonic movement of plates. If the plates got into fistfights, for example, you can bet we would see mountain ranges being born. If they got a divorce, drifting apart from each other, then a whole new ocean would be born. All of these things leave scars on the surface of Earth, but the cratons seem to always remain unfazed, like the cockroaches of geology. And since a craton can basically get punched in the face and feel nothing, scientists always assumed these things were nearly indestructible. But then, a group of researchers took their fancy machines to the test and realized that, wait, the cratons are falling apart? How? Enter the Farallon Plate, a really ancient tectonic plate that started to slide under North America's major plate over 100 million years ago. This is a pretty normal process, actually. It's called subduction, and it's how Earth recycles rocks and keeps itself from overheating. This subduction thing has been happening for so long that, by now, the Farallon is almost 400 miles away from the craton, sitting pretty chill at the lower mantle, weirdly close to the outer core of our planet. But the Farallon has been causing trouble, like that one roommate who moved out but keeps leaving weird stuff in the fridge. You see, as it sinks, it tugs on the bottom of North America's foundation, stretching it out and causing pieces to fall off into the deep mantle. And if that wasn't enough drama, the sinking Farallon has also leaked water and carbon dioxide into the surrounding rocks, making the craton even softer and easier to shred apart. Thanks, Farallon. Very cool of you. By studying hundreds of earthquakes across thousands of monitoring stations, scientists have confirmed the story. Big chunks of continental material are dripping downward, thinning the craton by as much as 37 miles. That's more missing rocks than can fit into a milk carton. Sounds dramatic, right? But don't worry. This is happening at a snail's pace. It'll take millions of years for anything noticeable to happen. Your great-great-great-great few grandkids from the distant future might still be standing on solid ground. But don't get too comfy. This thing may not be an urgent problem, but there's another type of sinking that's happening faster than you can say, "Help!" Here's the thing. By 2050, at least 32 major cities in the US, including New York, Baltimore, and Charleston, could be partially underwater. And guess what? This one is mostly our fault. Scientists noticed that since 2007, some cities have been sinking into the ground between 0.04 and 0.08 inches every year. Charleston, in South Carolina, is pulling ahead in the worst way possible, sinking 0.15 inches annually. Sure, these numbers sound tiny and a bit ridiculous, but Charleston is barely 9 feet above sea level. And a little sinking goes a long way when the ocean is breathing down your neck. On really bad flood days, people there have to abandon their cars and basically swim home. This whole phenomenon is called land subsidence. And when you mix sinking land with rising sea levels, you get a disaster cocktail of flooded streets, salty farmland, ghost forests, and a lot of very cranky homeowners. And it doesn't stop with just homes. Infrastructure like bridges, roads, airports, and power plants, all things we rely on daily, are also at risk of serious damage. Flooded electrical grids and sunken highways could cause billions more in economic losses and create major safety hazards for communities. Now, let's be fair. Not everything is humanity's fault. Some of this trouble dates all the way back to the Ice Age. About 12,000 years ago, massive ice sheets covered the northern US. They were heavy, like seriously heavy. The weight pushed the land down, and when the ice melted, the ground didn't just pop back up like a trampoline. Instead, it started playing a weird game of geological seesaw. The places that were squished started rising, and the places that weren't got pulled down. This whole process, called glacial isostatic adjustment, try to say that 3 times fast. But of course, humans found a way to make it worse. Groundwater extraction is a major culprit. Think of it like pulling the stuff out of the mattress. After a while, the whole thing just sags. In places like California's Central Valley, the land is dropping by up to 8 inches a year because we keep pumping out water during droughts. In cities like New York, the problem isn't just water. Skyscrapers themselves are making it worse. Yep, turns out if you stack millions of tons of concrete and steel onto soft ground, it tends to flatten. And in case you're wondering, the total mass of New York City's buildings is around 1.68 trillion pounds. That's about the same as 3.5 million statues of liberty piled up. With so much weight concentrated over a relatively small area, the underlying soils have no choice but to compress over time. And if you thought it couldn't get messier, think again. We've been building dams, which stop rivers from delivering fresh sediment to coastal areas. That sediment is kind of like Mother Nature's way of fluffing the ground back up. Without it, coastal lands are compacting like an old sponge. Plus, when wetlands are drained for agriculture or construction, the peaty soil dries out and collapses. Honestly, it's like the ground just can't catch a break. Scientists also noticed that the areas that used to be lush wetlands are now among the fastest sinking spots in the country, especially along the Gulf Coast. Louisiana, for example, is losing about a football field of land because of this mix of subsidence and rising seas. So what's the endgame here for us regular people who just want to live above sea level? Well, it's not looking great. Ghost forests, which are basically drowned woodlands, are popping up. Farmland is turning salty and unusable. And even sunny day flooding, where streets flood without any rain, is becoming a thing. Yikes! Meanwhile, over on the West Coast, California is not exactly winning either. San Francisco and Los Angeles are both sinking, which means that rising sea levels could hit them twice as hard and twice as fast. In some places like the Palos Verdes Peninsula, the ground has been sinking so fast, people over there might as well live like moles. So, is America turning into the next Atlantis? Probably not next week, but without serious action, like cutting back on groundwater pumping and planning smarter cities, at least 500,000 people are in serious danger. And the housing damage could easily rack up a jaw-dropping $109 billion by 2050. In the end, while North America isn't about to sink like a poorly made souffle, it's definitely showing some cracks in the crust. So maybe let's ease up on groundwater pumping, rethink how and where we build, and invest a little more in keeping our feet dry. After all, if the floor really does become lava someday, we're gonna wish we had at least fixed the leaks first. Giant vase-like sponges, otherworldly jellyfish, segmented worms covered with bristles, and large octopuses are the newest Antarctica discovery. Scientists found them after a giant iceberg had broken away, and it turned out to be a treasury of ancient life under ice. In January 2025, a huge iceberg the size of Chicago, called A84, broke off from Antarctica's George VI ice shelf, which is a large ice shelf about 280 miles long, 12 to 43 miles wide, and around 820 feet thick. In the summer, which lasts from November to late February, the ice shelf melts at the surface, and meltwater ribbon lakes form. They're elongated and ribbon-like. That's how they got their name. Anyway, when the iceberg floated away, it left part of the ocean floor wide open, and it was a spot no one had ever seen before. Scientists on the research ship Falkor 2 were nearby in the Bellingshausen Sea. As soon as they heard about the iceberg, they immediately changed their plans. They understood that it was a super rare chance to check out something unknown and amazing, like lifting a rock in the forest to see what's hiding underneath. The researchers used an underwater robot named Sebastian and explored the deep sea for 8 days. They went as deep as over 4,200 feet. Down there, they found a hidden ecosystem. There were big corals and sponges literally packed with sea animals. A whole world under the ice. The researchers thought they'd find some life down there, but they didn't expect to see so much. And this underwater ancient life wasn't just surviving, it had been thriving in that harsh, icy place for a really long time. Anemones that looked like fluffy little trees, sea spiders, ice fish, octopuses. The research was live streamed to scientists from all over the world, and those live streams are actually in open access. The coolest thing was that some discovered creatures seemed to be new species. Yes, there are probably new species in Antarctica in 2025, and some might only live in this region. That's because Antarctica isn't just really far away. It's been cut off from the rest of the world for millions of years. The Antarctic circumpolar current surrounds it, like a big water moat surrounding a castle. But even if it turns out that those species are not new, the scientists have still found snails, worms with bristles, crustaceans, like tiny crabs and shrimp, and a species of the phantom jellyfish. Those are super rare and look otherworldly. Their official name is too complicated, so let's just call them the giant phantom jelly. This jellyfish is huge. Its bell, the round umbrella part on top, can be more than 3 feet wide. It has 4 long arms that trail behind it. Each one as long as 33 feet, about as long as a school bus. Scientists first caught one way back in 1899, but it took them 60 years to realize it was a totally new kind of jellyfish. The phantom jellyfish has a see-through purplish body that looks kind of ghostly. Instead of normal jellyfish tentacles, it has these ribbon-like arms that help it catch food and pull it into its mouth right in the middle. Even though jellyfish don't have brains like we do, researchers watching the giant phantom jelly noticed something surprising. The otherworldly creature seemed to move its arms very carefully and with control, especially when swimming through tight spaces on the seafloor. It looked like it was being very cautious and deliberate. Ugh, creepy. Another sentient being? Jellyfish have a simple nerve net instead of a brain, which helps them sense the world around them. But the way this phantom jelly moved made scientists think it might be smarter or more coordinated than other jellyfish. Studying it can help scientists learn how animals without brains still manage to explore and survive in tricky places underwater. Another cool find was little worms called bristleworms. Scientists call them polychaetes. But let's stick with bristleworms because it kinda sounds fun. Lots of different kinds of them live in super cold, deep parts of the ocean. Bristleworms have bodies made of many segments, and they have tiny little bristles all along their sides. These bristles help them move around, feel what's near them, and even protect themselves from danger. One cool example is the Antarctic scaleworm. It's a type of bristleworm that lives in really cold, deep waters and has shiny, golden bristles that make it look pretty fancy. During Antarctic deep-sea exploration, the team also found giant sponges shaped like vases. Usually, sponges grow very slowly. So to get that huge, they must have been growing there for a really long time, maybe even hundreds of years. Their size shows that the deep-sea animals living around them didn't just move in recently. Those sea creatures have been there for decades and managed to form thriving communities under the ice. So, it really was ancient life hiding under all that ice. And that surprised scientists a lot. In older studies, people used to drop cameras through holes in the ice or visit iceberg areas long after the ice had broken off to explore hidden ecosystems. Back then, they mostly saw bare, empty seafloor with just a few living things. But this time, the team arrived just weeks after the giant iceberg broke away, and they got to see what was hiding right underneath it. The first 9 miles behind the ice shelf can hide rich and busy ecosystems. The area is dark, cold, and hidden for ages, and still, all kinds of creatures live there. This shows that life can survive in places that seem too harsh or frozen for anything to live. On the other hand, finding all this life down there isn't super surprising. Lots of animals live in dark, cold places underwater, so it makes sense that they'd be under the ice shelf too. The ice kind of hides them and keeps them safe from anything going on above. But what's weird is how many different kinds of creatures live there, even though it used to be a really closed-off space. It actually looks a lot like the seabed in parts of Antarctica that don't have ice on top. How can that be? Usually, tiny plants called phytoplankton grow near the surface where sunlight hits. Little shrimp-like animals called krill eat those plants at night. When krill get full, they sink down and bring food and nutrients to the ocean floor. Even their waste helps feed the deep-sea creatures. But if there's a huge ice cap above, sunlight can't get through, so no plants can grow there and no krill bring food down that way. Scientists thought this would mean less food and fewer animals down there, but they found a lot of life anyway. Turns out, food and nutrients probably sneak in under the ice, carried by underwater currents, kind of like rivers flowing under the ocean. Scientists found some animals that lived a long time, so it looks like those currents, which mostly come from melting glacier water, bring enough food to keep the ecosystem healthy and full of life. No one really knows what's going to happen to all that deep-sea life now that the iceberg has floated away. Those creatures have lived under the thick ice for who knows how long, in super stable, pitch-black conditions. Obviously, they're not exactly fans of change, so losing that icy roof might totally mess with their whole setup. One of the scientists mentioned that the ice shelf the iceberg came from has been creeping backward, like 25 miles over the last 50 years. That's a part of a bigger pattern. Antarctica's ice is melting faster and faster, which pushes sea levels up around the world. That's why this Antarctica discovery matters. The team's trying to figure out not just what's happening now, but how this hidden ecosystem fits into the bigger picture. If we can understand how this place is changing over decades or even centuries, maybe we can predict what's coming next. And it's pretty amazing that breaking ice can tell us so much, right? You're looking at the picture of your newly bought, exorbitantly expensive car. Why the picture? Because the car hasn't been delivered yet, but you can already imagine the speed at which your Lamborghini will swallow all those miles of the interstate. Now, back to reality. Your car will never be delivered because it sank to the very bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. But before that, it had burned into ashes. It sounds paradoxical, I know, but that's exactly what happened in February 2022 to a Japanese shipping company called MOL. Then, a tragic accident wiped out over 4,000 cars in one go. The cargo ship Felicity Ace was carrying thousands of vehicles from Germany to the US. But while passing near the Azores archipelago, the ship caught fire. It could have started with a faulty lithium battery in an electric car, and then there was no stopping it. The entire crew had to be evacuated, and the ship itself was burning uncontrollably for a week. Then, people faced the next challenge. How do you even move a ship this size after such enormous damage? Salvage teams spent another week trying to figure it out. Well, they didn't need to bother. On March 1st, the ship suddenly capsized and sank to the ocean floor. Obviously, its precious cargo went down with it. And by precious, I mean $438 million worth of cars, including 20 Lamborghini Huracans, 190 Bentleys, and 1,117 Porsches. As for the ship itself, it was worth a whopping $24.5 million. It was a terrible loss for MOL. On the other hand, the company is worth $12.2 billion, so they'll bounce back. Now, all those luxury cars are resting peacefully at the bottom of the ocean. The fish in that area must have been ecstatic to get a fresh shipment of Lambos. They just need to figure out how to work the pedals. Let me show you another expensive thing that ended up stranded at the bottom of the ocean because of a tragic accident. It's a 45-foot catamaran called the Carolina Viking. It was abandoned by its crew after a huge leak on board. It happened at the end of 2024. The crew of the Swedish-flagged Leopard 45 catamaran reported water pouring in. Their electrical system had totally failed too. Soon, the crew figured out that the leak was coming from the starboard engine compartment. It was bad. The water was coming in through the rudder stalk, and it was flooding the boat fast. So, the skipper made an emergency call, and after talking to MRCC Cape Verde, he decided to head toward the Cape Verde Islands. This destination was about 300 nautical miles away. They were moving upwind using just one engine. Sadly, it didn't solve the problem. A few other yachts that were nearby changed course to offer help, and it turned out the crew really needed it. Hours later, the catamaran's electrical system switched off completely. The skipper had to change the course, heading toward a nearby yacht, the Cinderella di San Remo, which was able to rush to their aid. In the afternoon, after realizing things weren't going to get better, the 5-person crew made the call to abandon the ship. So, they transferred to the Cinderella di San Remo. As for the vessel, it was just left in the middle of the ocean, getting flooded. Another unexpected thing you can find underwater was actually planned. Atlanta has found a cool way to reuse its old subway cars. Instead of just scrapping them, they sink them into the Atlantic Ocean and create artificial reefs, turning them into underwater condos for marine life. The thing is, the state of Georgia has been working on creating artificial reefs for more than 40 years. They've been sinking stuff like old ships, tugboats, concrete, and lots of other stuff to give fish and other sea creatures a place to live. Normally, the ocean floor along Georgia's coast is just a bunch of sand and shells, so there's not much for fish to hide in or grow around. That's why creating such mini ecosystems where fish can find shelter, spawn, and just do their own thing is so important. One day, they decided to add some of Atlanta's old subway cars to the mix. Those cars were retired and ready to be disposed of. The city teamed up with Georgia's Coastal Resources Division and MARTA, the transit agency, and turned the cars into reef-building material. They had to make sure the cars were safe first, so they removed all the hazardous materials and contaminants. Then, they carefully picked a spot about 23 miles offshore, called El Reef. Then, the cars were loaded onto a barge and delivered to their destination. Now, they're sitting about 60 feet under the surface. They're going to add 6 more subway cars to the reef in the future. Now, let's move to a very different place. It's just as abandoned, but not underwater. Ever heard about Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia? Those are salt flats that seem to stretch forever. There are even hotels made entirely of salt there. This land is also pretty isolated. No people, no cars, just endless white salt. And then, bam! You see a train graveyard. The Cementerio de Trenes is actually just a few old trains. Most of them are from the early 1900s. At that time, they were imported from Britain. Back then, they were planning to turn Uyuni into a massive train hub, connecting different cities. But many things went wrong, and the train station dream was forgotten. These days, the trains really look beat up. They're completely covered in salt, which makes them look as if they've been there for centuries. They're rusty, broken down, and totally weathered. You can explore more than 100 train cars, and each one is different. Some are falling apart, others have graffiti all over them. It just adds to the whole vibe of decay. The next abandoned thing on our list has actually been restored. Ever heard about the American Dream? The world's longest limo? It's a 100-foot machine that's got a helipad on the roof. It's a Cadillac, but not a regular one. Imagine a limo and a cruise ship having a baby. That's the American Dream for you. The thing is super heavy too, weighing around 25,000 pounds, and it was a total wreck before anyone even thought of bringing it back to life. It was just sitting, abandoned in New York, rotting away. Some guys tried fixing it up at the Automuseum, but that didn't work out. So they tried hauling it to the Desertland Park Car Museum for another shot. The trip wasn't smooth. The hood flew off somewhere along the way and disappeared forever, but they still managed to truck this thing down in pieces. In any case, these two guys, Michael Deser, a real estate mogul, and Michael Manning from Automuseum, went all out to bring the vehicle back. They chopped up 3 other Cadillacs just to get parts, like new leather, vinyl, and carpets. They even swapped out the engines. The whole thing was so messed up, they basically had to rebuild it. Look at it now! Originally, the limo had 6 Cadillacs all glued together, and the guy who designed it was behind cars like KITT from Knight Rider and the DeLorean from Back to the Future. At one point, the American Dream had 2 engines, TVs, telephones, a jacuzzi, a waterbed, and a swimming pool with a diving board. There was even a swivel function so it could make turns. But I'm not sure if this feature is still there after the restoration. At the moment, the limo's up and running. At the same time, you can't just drive it around like a normal car. It's ridiculously long, and turning is basically impossible. And if you get stuck, well, good luck getting it out. But even with all that, 75 people can fit inside, and it's still got a pool in the back. The interior's not completely finished yet, but still, this thing is insane.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.